Riveron, said Edmure with a beaming smile. Thank you, brother, said Kat before she hugged her brother, whom reminded Brandon of Benjen, from their age and their happy smiles. Thinking about Benjen reminded him of the last letter he received from him, where he told him that he served alongside Roriger often and the two had developed a strange friendship. Thinking about that made Brandon feel sick to his stomach before he joined Kat and shook Edmure's hand. It is good to see you again, Edmure. And you also, Barbara, said Brandon before kissing Barbara's free hand, whilst she held on to Kermit with her other. Welcome to Riveron, Caitlin and Brandon, Barbara said with a friendly smile. And how is little Kermit there? Asked Brandon. A strong and demanding little boy. Hungrier than he should be, Barbara commented. Whilst Kat grimaced at her jest, Brandon, Edmure and Rob laughed. Edmure, where is father? Asked Kat. Unwell. I'm afraid it is serious. Last week, he thought I was Uncle Brindon and was asking why I had not wed Bethany Redwine yet, he explained whilst the Tully children were greeting their Stark cousins and began to show them around Riveron, though Rob already knew his way around Riveron from his time warded there. Gods. Poor father, said Kat. Brandon put his hand over her shoulder and looked up at Edmure. And where is your Uncle Brindon? Asked Brandon. He's still in King's Landing, as Master of Arms of the Red Keep. We received a raven from Lysa that they were at the Bloody Gate and on their way to King's Landing. Gee, Elbert, Harold, Alina and Milner, he replied. Elbert. Gods, it will be good to see him again, Brandon thought with a grin at seeing his childhood friend once more, whom was now Lord of the Uri after John Arryn died 2 years before. And he was also looking forward to seeing Ned, Ashura and their children in King's Landing. It had been 5 years since he had last seen him, in Winterfell when Brandon had invited the Danes. Ned and Ashura had brought their children John, Edric, Lyra and Deanna. Inside the Great Hall, Barbara passed Kermit to a Septa. Take him to the nursery and put him to sleep, Mayra, she said. Yes, my lady, said the Septa. Come, Kat. I'll take you to father, said Edmure. They walked upstairs and were brought to the bedchambers of the Lord of Riveron. When he had last seen him, Hoster Tully had appeared to be so strong and full of life and vigor. But he looked so weak and feeble now. A very ambitious man. Both his daughters married to Lords Paramount and 3 of his granddaughters are potential suitors to the soon-to-be crowned king. Hoster Tully had resigned from its position as Master of Coin 5 years before, because he wanted to spend more time with his grandchildren, whilst Brindon took on the role as Master of Arms of the Red Keep after Edmure had married Barbara Bracken. Will he remember Kat? Will he know me? What will he think when he meets our children? Father. Hoster Tully sat up in his bed and looked up. Kat. Is that you, my cat? He asked affectionately. Yes, father, she replied before walking to the chair beside his bed. Oh, come here, he said. She hugged and kissed his forehead. He beamed at seeing her before he turned to Brandon. As tall and handsome as I remember, Brandon. How are you? He asked. Good, Hoster. Though sad to see you bedridden, Brandon admitted. Oh, this. It's just being a weak old man, he replied before shaking hands with Brandon. Now, where are my grandchildren? He asked eagerly. Tristifer, Minissa, Benjicot and Jarjana are showing our children around Riveron, Kat replied. They are. Take me to the balcony, please, he begged. Edmure and Brandon helped him stand up and get out of bed. They took him to a balcony Kat had said was always his favorite. From there, they had a perfect view of the courtyard and the inner walls of Riveron. Brandon looked down and saw Rob, Alaric, Bern, Tristifer and Benjicot sparring in the training yard, Arya shooting at targets on the training yard, and Sansa, Minissa and Jarjana looking around the gardens once planted by Kat's lady mother. Brandon looked at his good father, whom was beaming happily down at his grandchildren. It's worth it to be an old man to see my beautiful grandchildren and see them all so happy, he said. You forget, Hoster. That's not all of them. You have another 3 coming to Riveron, all of the way from the Uri, said Brandon before patting him on the shoulder. He chuckled at that and nodded. Yes, very true. Very true indeed. Chapter 16, The Father Who Raised Me. Chapter text. Theon 2. Milord. Lord Roderick Harlaw is here, said Helga. Show him in, Helya, Theon replied. As Helya left, Asha turned to Theon. "What is Uncle Roderick doing here?" she asked. "He is here at my invitation. I need his advice on addressing the bannerman," he explained. Asha left to find Mother and bring her to see Uncle Roderick as Helya brought him into the Great Hall. Theon smiled when he saw Uncle Roderick enter the Great Hall of the Great Keep of Pike. The man whom was more of a father to Theon than father ever was. The man whose sons, Henk and Harwin, were more brothers to Theon than Roderick and Maren were. The man whom taught Theon how to fight, how to sail, how to lead in peace, how to command a ship's crew, but above all, how to be wise. "Hello, Uncle," said Theon. "Theon, my lad," said a chuckling Uncle Roderick, whom was beaming with pride as the two hugged. "It warms my heart to see you sat on the sea stone chair and back in Pike," he said with pride as he patted him on the shoulder. "By the drowned god, why couldn't father have been like you? If he had been, I would have had happier memories of him than him calling me an idiot and letting Roderick and Maren hurt me and belittle me. Perhaps he might have actually have taught them right from wrong." "And how is your mother?" he asked. "She'll be here soon, Uncle. But I called you here to Pike, because I wanted your advice on something important," Theon explained. The smile on his face vanished as he contemplated what Theon could be talking about. "Go on," he replied. They sat down at the high table together. "You know that Aegon Targaryen is to be crowned soon. I should be crowned in 2 moons from now. Perhaps a bit longer, depending on the high and mighty lords of Westeros," said Uncle Roderick. "What do you mean?" Theon asked. "Put it this way. The boy is 5 years younger than you, and he is reputedly very handsome, a good fighter and a skilled jouster. Every nobleman with a pretty daughter with large tits is going to be riding to King's Landing now, and they will try and have their daughters charm the young dragon. Unofficially, all nobility of the realm will be in King's Landing longer because Aegon Targaryen will be expected to court a noble lady," he explained. Theon nodded as he thought about this. "My point is, should I go before I have had the chance to tell the bannerman of my intentions?" Theon asked. Roderick grimaced as he realized what Theon was saying. This is a conundrum, as the mainlanders would say. And the Iron Islanders would say that you have been spending too much time with them, learning their fancy words. But, I agree, you should go. However, when you are to leave King's Landing, write to the bannermen and tell them to come to Pike. Ever since the clash, the bannermen have been eager for direction and leadership from Pike. You must be the one to do that," said Uncle Roderick as he clapped his hand on Theon's shoulder. Theon nodded. "Will they follow me when I make it clear that the old way is dead and that we must move on?" Theon asked. I think they will. Obviously, there'll be a few whom think you an idiot and a traitor to our heritage and to the drowned god. But, the bannermen are not fools. They know that any attempts to take back independence and for an Iron Islander to wear the Driftwood crown will not end well. Dalton and Dagon Greyjoy both tried to launch countless raids on the mainland, during the Dance of the Dragons and the First Blackfyre rebellions respectively. Neither of those ended well. When the Westermen came to the Iron Islands because of the Red Kraken, thousands of small folk were butchered in revenge for what he had done to them. And after Dalton Greyjoy was killed, it erupted into a conflict in which Ironborn killed Ironborn. Your father might have become yet another of those fools. But you, Theon, you are no such fool. How is it that all Greyjoys before me were so obsessed with our history as reavers and plunderers that they saw past what was right in front of them? That war with the mainlands and independence is fucking not possible. If father had tried to launch a war for independence, it would have ended with the destruction of House Greyjoy and the deaths of thousands of men, women and children of the Iron Islands. So, they can be convinced to follow a new way as Grandfather Quarian would have wanted?" Theon asked. "I believe so. But it'll be up to you to start the changes. Think of ways to improve our way of life. The Iron Islands doesn't have an abundance in gold mines like the Lannisters or fertile farmlands like the Tyrells. Think of how to convince the bannermen, and turn the captains of the Iron Islands from reavers into peaceful seafarers." Theon nodded and shook Uncle Roderick's hand. "Thank you, Uncle, for everything," he said. "It's all right, Theon. Whatever you need, you know that I am always there for you," he replied before patting his shoulder. And then they looked up when a door opened. Theon and Uncle Roderick turned to see Mother walk inside the great hall. Alanis. By the drowned god, you look well, said Uncle Roderick as he stood up and walked to her. And you are ever the charming liar, brother. Did you learn that jape from the Tyrells? She asked with a chuckle. The Tyrells? No. But I am glad to see you happy, dear sister, he said honestly before they shared a hug. It made Theon happy to see that mother was indeed happy. Asher had told him that after the clash, she had little to no reason to be happy, for losing her husband and 2 of her sons. But ever since his return to Pike, she was happy and was no longer drinking heavily as she had done since the Crow's Eye attacked Pike. Theon thought about what he needed to do, as Lord Paramount of the Iron Islands. I will sail to King's Landing soon, with Asher. I will leave Uncle Roderick in charge whilst we are gone to the capital. If I cannot convince my sister or my mother that the route father intended for us is fraught with disasters and storms that we cannot weather, then I might never be able to convince all of our bannermen. We must adapt with the rest of the world or perish with the rest of history. And I will not die without doing for the Iron Islands what Grandfather Quayan tried to do for us. Rob 2. As beautiful it may look, it will never be as beautiful a city as White Harbor, said Rob. Ah, believe me, my boy, when we came here at the end of the rebellion, there was a horrible stench in the city. It stank of corpses, brothels, shit, piss, wine and rotten food. I'm glad that the Queen Regent actually decided to have some sewers built in the city, otherwise, whom in their right mind would want to be queen? Will we be welcome here, father? Considering how the Southerners all look down on us, said Alaric. I don't see why they should. Southerners are stupid, yes, but they are not that stupid. Especially when the small folk of the city and the royal family themselves all have good reason to respect House Stark and be grateful to House Stark, said father. The Starks had come with only a few of the northern houses to the city. The others whom had come were houses Marndale, Bolton, Carstark, Umber, Mormont, Dustin and Riswell. Upon riding through the Lion's Gate, Rob noticed father grinning as he looked up at the gateway and at the steps leading up to it. It was here that I beheaded Aes the Mad. And it was there that I beat Roriger and told him that your Uncle Ned was on his way to Dorne. And where Lord Bolton told him of what almost became of his family, father explained, pointing at various places at the gateway as he did so. But as they rode through the streets, father was recognized by small folk of the city. It's him. Brandon the Avenging Wolf, one cried out. Hundreds, if not thousands, of small folk all cheered and clapped at father, whom simply nodded with a smile at many of them. Wonder what sort of welcome the Lannisters will get. They arrived at the Red Keep, which Rob had to admit, was a magnificent castle, but overly extravagant in design and color. And he despised looking at the Great September of Baelor. Baelor the Blessed, a fucking lunatic and moron. The man would have sent the Faith Militant onto the North and the Iron Islands and persecute and purge all whom did not worship the Seven. Rob climbed down from his horse and was surprised when he saw 2 old friends directing a rich noble family to their quarters in the Red Keep. Brynden. Lucas. Rob called. The 2 turned around and grinned when they saw Rob walking towards them. Rob, you little wolf. Surprised to see a creature of the winter come to the south where the sunshine is enough to melt the wall, said Brynden. Fuck that. It'll take more than this southern sunshine to melt the wall, Rob replied before shaking hands with both of them. So, what has you 2 directing guests into the Red Keep? Asked Rob. Well, that is actually Lucas doing, replied Brynden before nodding at his younger brother. Lucas. How did you get yourself and your brother into this? Asked Rob. Quite funny actually, Rob. I'm now friends with our soon-to-be king, and the Queen Regent asked that I and Brynden personally greet guests and show them where they are quartered, said Lucas. You're friends with the Crown Prince? How? How in the 7 hells did you become friends with the Crown Prince? Asked Rob. Quite funny that, actually, Rob, Brynden replied with a chuckle. I unhorsed him in a tourney, said Lucas. Seriously? You unhorsed him? You mad fucking raven? Asked Rob. I unhorsed him, and when I went to see if he was alright, he was laughing. And after I crowned Bethany my queen of love and beauty, he invited me to his tent, where he basically said thank you for unhorsing him. Apparently, he's been fucking pissed off that all his opponents keep letting him win, including the likes of Loras Tyrell, that he wanted an actual challenge, Lucas explained. Good on the Crown Prince. He won't learn anything about fighting if all his opponents just let him win, said Rob. I was just thinking that myself when we were talking in his tent, said Lucas. It was then that Mother and Father joined them. Sir Brynden, isn't it? And Sir Lucas? Of House Blackwood, asked Mother. Yes, Lady Stark, said Brynden as both he and Lucas bowed their heads to Rob's parents. Might you show us where we are quartered? It wouldn't do for you to chat away with our son, said Father. Of course, Lord Stark. This way, said Brynden. Chapter 17, The Game Begins Afresh. Chapter Text. Sansa 2. As Jane and Beth helped Sansa pick a dress for tonight's feast and dance, Sansa looked in the mirror and thought about combing her hair. What do you think? Sansa asked, gesturing to her hair. I think it looks no different than the last time you asked, Jane replied. Well, I'm sorry, but this is the night that we meet the Crown Prince for the first time and I want to look my best, Sansa replied anxiously. She ignored the grin shared between Jane and Beth before she picked a grey and white dress from her chest of dresses. It's perfect. It is a beautiful dress and it emphasizes the colors of House Stark, Beth said smartly. Good point, Sansa thought as she held it up to look at it. Her two best friends helped her put the dress on and Sansa looked at herself in the mirror one last time before selecting the necklace that Grandfather Hoster had gifted her on her 5 and 10th name-a-day. It was a silver necklace with sapphires encrusted on an image of the Stark direwolf in the center. Thank you, Grandfather, she inwardly said as she fastened it around her neck. Sansa. Girls. Are you ready? We are expected in 5 minutes, said Father from outside her chambers. We're coming, Father, said Sansa, standing up from her chair. Are you sure that you don't want us to have one final check over your dress? Asked Jane. Or your jewelry, added Beth. Shut up, both of you, Sansa replied before they giggled mischievously. They arrived in the throne room, stood with the other northern families. And from where she stood, everywhere Sansa looked, there was noble families from every corner of the kingdoms of Westeros. When she looked at a small contingent of nobles, namely just 3 noble families, she deduced that they were from the Iron Islands, given how they were dressed. Then she looked at a large family dressed in green and gold. In front of them was a fat man dressed in very extravagant and expensive clothes, and holding his hand was his tall and beautiful wife, and holding his other hand was a beautiful girl, only a few years older than Sansa. The girl was very pretty, with long and curling brown hair and doe-like eyes. They must be the Tyrells and she must be Margaery Tyrell. Then she spotted a family, all dressed in red and gold. Stood at the front was a tall man with grey and gold hair, and stood next to him was a very handsome man, younger than Father, with golden hair and holding the hands of his glamorous and beautiful wife and his daughter. The daughter was very pretty, the same age as Sansa, with golden hair and a beautiful and friendly smile and emerald green eyes. The Lannisters, and she must be Myrcella Lannister. As Sansa continued to look around the throne room, she noticed Aunt Lysa and Uncle Elbereth and Sansa's cousins, including Alina, whom she noticed was looking around the throne room with the same inquisitive eye as Sansa. Though her eyes often rested on the more beautiful girls and women, she noticed, albeit not for the same reasons as Sansa. She never gives up, does she? Sansa wondered, remembering her cousins' tastes in the time Aunt Lysa and Uncle Elbereth visited Winterfell with their children. Sansa at last turned to the Iron Throne, where sat a very handsome young man with long and wild silver hair. He looked uncomfortable as he was sat down on the Iron Throne. Uncomfortable, but he put a brave face on as he looked around at all the assembled nobility whom had come from all around the realm. The king. Gods, he is so handsome. Stood beside him were 2 women. On his right was a beautiful Dornish woman whom could only be the Queen Regent, whom had such a warm and kind smile that Sansa felt could put all people at ease. And on his left was the Queen Dowager, whom looked as formidable as she looked beautiful. My lords and ladies, friends and family, thank you all for coming tonight. It is an honor to welcome you all to what is the most important year of my life, and am glad to share this with you, said King Aegon. Sansa smiled as she clapped along with all others in the throne room. And it was then that the king stood up and was followed by his mother and grandmother and began to greet the lord's paramount families. Naturally, he began with the Martells, his cousins and his mother's own family. He beamed as he hugged and kissed his Martell cousins. And next, he greeted the Greyjoys, whom were only 2. From what Sansa could gather, they were the young Lord Theon Greyjoy and his sister, Asha Greyjoy. Looking at Asha Greyjoy, Sansa was reminded of Daisy Mormont and her sisters and how they all looked the part of a hardened warrior. Sansa was confident that she would have no competition from Asha Greyjoy, for she looked uninterested in all in the throne room whilst her brother looked eager to make a good impression with the king. Next, the king met the Tyrells. "Your Grace, this is indeed a great honor, and I vow that House Targaryen can always count on the support of House Tyrell," said the corpulent Lord of Highgarden. "Gods, don't talk too much," Sansa thought as she rolled her eyes. And she noticed how the king looked impatient for Lord Tyrell to finish his grand speech on how loyal House Tyrell will be to him and his reign, before he introduced his daughter, Margaery. "She'll be my main competition," Sansa realized as she curtsied perfectly and spoke softly to the king. And next they came to the Lannisters. "This should be interesting," father commented as the king, the Queen Regent and the Queen Dowager faced Tywin Lannister, with unmistakably angry glares. A blind man can see that it won't be easy for the Lannisters to restore relations with the Iron Throne. But that is hardly surprising, after what happened that day when his own men tried to murder the royal family until father and Uncle Ned saved them all, Sansa thought. The staring between the king and the Lord Paramount of the Westerlands seemed to come to a stop when Tywin Lannister held his hand out and addressed him as "Your Grace." After his mother whispered to him, the king shook his hand. He politely smiled at greeting his heir, Sir Jaime Lannister, before beaming as he met his grandchildren, Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen. Her curtsies were perfect, not as good as Margaery Tyrell's, but her smile was innocent and pure as she greeted the king. And then they came to Sansa and her family. As they did so, Sansa felt relieved at how the three smiled when they laid eyes on father. "Lord Stark, it's been many years since you were last here," said the Queen Regent. "Indeed, Your Grace. I was saying to my lady wife only 5 minutes ago how much the city has changed since I was last here," said father. "Quite so, Lord Stark," said the Queen Dowager as father kissed both their hands. "My king," said father before bowing to him. "No, no, Lord Stark," said the king. All turned to the king as he gestured at father to stop. Sansa couldn't believe it when he bowed to father. "Your Grace?" father asked in confusion. At last, the king rose and faced father. "It is only right that I bow to you in gratitude for all that you and your family did to save mine many years ago, when I was just a boy. And for that, House Targaryen shall always be indebted to House Stark," he said. Sansa blushed at how the king was acknowledging House Stark for all that they did to save House Targaryen that day in the city when the king was just a baby. She glanced around, and noticed how jealous the Lannisters and the Tyrells looked at that. Next the king kissed mother's hand and shook hands with Robb. "Here it goes," Sansa thought as she inhaled as discreetly as she could. "Your Grace," said Sansa, curtsying as best as she could to him. "My lady." "That's a very pretty necklace," he noticed. It was then that she remembered overhearing Sir Lucas Blackwood telling Robb how annoyed the king was that all his jousting opponents were letting him win. "Don't talk like a coy maiden or a lickspittle. Make him laugh," she realized. "Thank you, Your Grace. Though I think yours is much prettier," Sansa replied confidently, nodding at a dragon glass chain he wore around his neckline that was decorated with the sigil of House Targaryen. Both his mother and his grandmother looked surprised by Sansa's jest. But the king burst out laughing. Sansa felt a slight grin at making him laugh. "Thank you, my lady. I shall endeavor to choose jewelry more appropriate for your eyes from now on," he jested before he met Sansa's younger siblings. Sansa smiled as she relished in the victory of making the king laugh. Aegon too. Aegon still felt amused as he greeted the Baratheons, the Tullys and lastly the Arryns. Gods, how often is it that someone tells a jest and it is actually a funny one? Not often at all, he thought as he glanced at the beautiful lady of House Stark. Soon after meeting the families of the Lords Paramount, all were gathered in the feasting hall for dinner and for a dance. Aegon had already decided whom he would dance with, mother, grandmother, Rhaenys and then Aunt Daenerys before he would dance with any other. He knew that the ladies of the realm would be eagerly pushed by their parents, or grandparents, to dance with him. But as he looked at the ladies Rhaenys and Aunt Daenerys spoke of, he thought that the most realistic choices were Sansa Stark, Myrcella Lannister or Margaery Tyrell. But of the three, he liked Sansa Stark the most. As well as being beautiful, he admired her free tongue and how she was unafraid to jest at his expense. Whilst he had nothing personal against Myrcella Lannister, he despised both her grandfather and her mother, for all that Mother and Jon Connington had told him. And then there was Margaery Tyrell, whom had annoyed in the past with how she eagerly tried to gain his favor by overreacting to his shows of chivalry and congratulating him too much after he unhorsed someone in a joust. Aegon stood up from his seat at the high table and the troubadours began to play a joyful tune. He took Mother's hand and began to dance with her, whilst noble lords such as Brandon and Catelyn Stark, Elbereth and Lysa Arryn, Edmure and Barbara Tully, Jaime and Alysanne Lannister, Uncle Oberyn and Aunt Ellaria and Mace and Aeleri Tyrell, also began to dance alongside Aegon. "How are you feeling, Aegon?" asked Mother. "Unsure how I can deal with all of this, especially when they all seem so eager to ingratiate themselves with me for favor or for me to wed their daughters," replied Aegon. "You can do it, Aegon. You are never alone here. You have me, your sister, your aunt, your uncle and your grandmother," she replied before she leant in and kissed his forehead. "Thank you, Mother." Aegon switched to grandmother, whilst he noticed others began to step up and dance. Rhaenys was dancing with Robb Stark, whom was making her laugh with some jest, whilst Aunt Daenerys was dancing with Willers Tyrell, whom was making her smile. And then there was Uncle Viserys, whom was dancing with Minissa Tully. "I'm afraid that this is something you will have to get used to, Aegon, my dear," said grandmother. "Oh, I know, grandmother. I've been getting plenty of it at Tony's," said Aegon. But before he could say any more, he turned around to see Jaime Lannister and his daughter, Myrcella Lannister. "Your Grace, might I have a dance with you?" he asked grandmother. "Of course, Jaime, dear boy," said grandmother with a beaming smile, which Aegon noticed he blushed slightly at. "May I dance with you, my lady?" asked Aegon. "Thank you, my prince," said Myrcella Lannister. Her smile was pure and gentle and she had an innocent beauty, enhanced by her long and flowing golden hair and her emerald green eyes. "How are you finding it in the capital?" he asked her. "It's such a beautiful city and there are so many great sights to see. Though we arrived later than I hoped, for I wanted to see more of the city up close," she replied sweetly. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, my lady. Though I'm sure that your father will be more than happy to show you around the capital and around the Red Keep," he replied. "Just don't expect me to take time out of my schedule for simply showing a suitor around the capital." "Yes, I was going to ask him, my prince. But, my prince, I wanted to say something." "By all means, my lady," said Aegon with a friendly smile, remembering how Mother used her smile which won over the hearts and minds of many people Aegon had seen. "I wanted to say how sorry I am for what happened in the Red Keep from my grandfather's men and what almost happened to the royal family. It was a truly terrible thing that should never have happened," she said. Aegon noticed how she said it and how she looked when she said it. She is being genuine. I doubt that Tywin Lannister would have wanted her to speak so foully of him and House Lannister, even in the hopes of his granddaughter being queen. "My thanks, my lady," he said with a grateful smile before kissing her hand. He noticed how red she was when she blushed at the kiss. Any redder, and she could be mistaken for a Lannister banner. Before they could dance or speak any further, he saw Margaery and Loras Tyrell approach them. "Here we go," Aegon thought, resisting the temptation to roll his eyes at this. "My prince, might I have a dance?" asked the Rose of Highgarden. "Of course, Lady Margaery," said Aegon. Whilst Loras Tyrell began to dance with Myrcella Lannister, Aegon danced with his sister, whom was a very skilled dancer, he couldn't deny. "Mother and Rhaenys would never want me to wed either a Lannister or a Tyrell after what Tywin Lannister tried to do and after what Mace Tyrell lazily waited out the war besieging Storm's End. You seem quite uncomfortable tonight, my prince. Are you all right?" she asked, her smile friendly and kind. "You have a good eye, Lady Margaery." "Yes, I'm quite tired. I haven't danced this much in a long time and it is only now that I realize just how tiring being a king will be," he replied as honestly as he could. Though she never stops trying, she is more a friend than anything else, he decided. "It does all seem stressful, I can see that it may all seem overwhelming, my prince," she conceded. But as he held her hand up and she twisted on the spot, he held her hand once again as she faced him. "But you have many good women in your life to help you, my prince. Your mother, your grandmother, your sister and your aunt. And of course, one day, your queen, she added with a coy smile. And there it is. That didn't take long. That's very kind of you to say so, Lady Margaery, said Aegon with a smile. Then he noticed Robb and Sansa Stark standing just next to him. My lord, might I have a dance with Lady Sansa? Asked Aegon. Of course, my prince. Just bear this in mind, she's a terrible dancer. She'll step on your feet, he replied with a jesting tone. Whilst she lightly slapped her brother's arm, Aegon chuckled before he held hands with Lady Sansa. I'm sure this must all be very different to what you are used to in the north, my lady, said Aegon. It is, my prince. The company couldn't be more exotic, and it is so interesting to learn about different kingdoms and their cultures in person rather from a book, she replied. Very wisely put, my lady, said Aegon with a nod. They talked more as they danced, and Aegon enjoyed speaking with her. She was fumbling over herself trying to answer questions that she thought would be the answer he wanted to hear. Nor was she trying to charm him with beautiful jewelry nor dresses that showed off her cleavage, such as Margaery Tyrell, or indeed, like cousin Arianne. And she was kind, genuinely so, like Myrcella Lannister. But he enjoyed her honesty and free tongue. Catelyn 3. Catelyn couldn't believe her daughter's audacity in her jesting with the future king, but was relieved at how he had burst out laughing. And during the dance at the feast, she beamed at how Sansa danced with him whilst she herself had been dancing with Ed Muir. She returned to dancing with Bran and pointed out their eldest daughter to him. Bran, look, she said excitedly. Bran turned to see Sansa dancing with the Crown Prince, the very same boy whom he and his brother had rescued alongside his family when he was just a baby. Catelyn, whom had long dreamt of Sansa becoming queen, was excited to see her dance with the Crown Prince. For a while, she had been afraid that Bran would focus on marrying her to a northern noble family, rather than try and expand on what his father had started. Ricard was wise in trying to integrate the north with the south. Bran is making a mistake in not being interested in resuming what his father had begun. Gods, I'm almost sounding as ambitious as father was when I was Sansa's age. But, if Sansa were to wed Aegon, it would be a greater step up for House Stark, and the South would never look down on the Starks or the North ever again. Perhaps I can still convince him of this, and convince him to cast aside the idea of a betrothal for Robb to a northern noble lady, she thought as she noticed Robb dancing with Margaery Tyrell. Sansa seems happy, said Catelyn. Aye, but she cannot very well frown when dancing with the king, can she? Bran replied. I'm only trying to say that Sansa has made a good first impression with our future king, said Catelyn. I know of what you are speaking of, Cat. I do. But, it was my father's ambitions for the North to be integrated with the South which led to his murder, my sister falling victim to Rhaegar's lies, and thousands of people across the realm dying. Myself and my best friends were almost among them, he replied. Times have changed, Bran. And this time, House Targaryen owes a great deal to House Stark, she said. And you would have me use that as leverage to marry Sansa to Aegon. Cat, I don't care for the ever-damned Game of Thrones. I want my children to be safe and to be happily wed to ones they love. And I especially don't want to be in this accursed place in which father was murdered and I was almost murdered, he replied. Damn, Cat, why did you talk of that? And what of Sansa? What if she decided she wants to wed him? Asked Catelyn. Only if she truly wants this, and if our future king wants it also, will I accept. But as a father, I want her to be happy with whom she has wed. For if he decides to take mistresses like Aegon IV, then I will not be happy, Bran replied. I shall speak with Sansa later, and see if she wants to be wed to him. The king didn't seem too enthralled with the other options as he does with Sansa. In fact, they have been dancing for longer than he has danced with the likes of Myrcella Lannister or Margaery Tyrell. Once the feast was at last over, Catelyn found Sansa chatting with Jane Poole, her best friend from childhood, and she called Sansa to join her on a walk around their quarters in the Maiden Vault. I saw you looked happy when you danced with the Crown Prince, Catelyn asked with a beaming smile. I was, mother. He is so handsome and kind and thoughtful, she replied in excitement. Catelyn was happy, not that she had succeeded in charming the king, but that she seemed so happy at speaking with him. It reminded Catelyn of when she had first met Bran and how breathless she had felt around the dashing and handsome heir to Winterfell. Now, Sangza, your father wants you to think very careful about this, she said. What do you mean, mother, she asked, worried at what she could be talking about. What I mean is that courting the Lord of a Holding is one matter. But courting the Crown Prince himself, shortly before he is to be crowned king, is an entirely different one. Above all, he wants you to be happy and for you to be sure that it is he whom you want to wed, she explained. I do, mother. I want to wed him, she said excitedly, almost jumping up and down as she said it. If you are serious about it, Sangza, then spend time with him. Learn about him and pay attention to what he likes and doesn't like. What helped when I was courting your father was that I always remembered the little things, said Caitlin. Chapter 18, The Knight and the Warrior. Chapter text. Asher 2. What a time to be in the capital, Asher thought as he looked around the city. Though Asher had arrived now in the capital, he still considered his choices. He had thought of either becoming a sellsword in the service of the Company of the Rose and fight in Essos, or resuming his original course of becoming a knight of the Kingsguard. Now that the Crown Prince was soon to be crowned king and possibly marry his future queen, all eyes were on the capital. And all the nobility of the realm were seemingly in the capital to see their new king, whom had been raised to the role by his mother and grandmother since he was a babe, in the immediate aftermath of Robert's rebellion, where grandfathers Burrows and Thorin and Uncle Davin had been killed. Asher found himself on the tourney grounds, where he frowned at seeing a knight dressed in the colors of House Byrch practicing jousting against a target. But as he frowned, he recognized a few people standing a mere stone's throw away and were looking at the Byrch lord with equal disdain. Uncle Georgie Bramfield, his wife Lady Tildar Waynwood and their son and daughter, Burrows and Davina. Asher had met the Bramfields when they had come to Ironrath 3 years before, and the Foresters had visited them the year before at Barleyhold. Uncle Georgie! Asher called. Uncle Georgie turned around and beamed when he saw him. Asher! Gods, it's good to see you here, he said. Asher shook his hand and then hugged him. And you, Uncle? Mother, Father and Uncle Malcolm send their best, he said. And I'm glad to hear it. But are they not here? Asked Uncle Georgie. I'm afraid not. Now that the Kalin Canal is built, Ironwood is in more demand than ever to build ships and for construction of new villages across the north, he explained. Well, I am glad to see you in the capital. So, what brings you down here? Asked Uncle Georgie before his family all came to say hello to Asher. As a matter of fact, I had come because I wanted to become a knight of the Kingsguard, said Asher. Is that so? And become the first northerner in the Kingsguard? Asked Aunt Tildar. Yes, Aunt. But I am a skilled warrior and I want to make good use of that in the Kingsguard, he explained. And I am sure that the Kingsguard would be glad to have you in their numbers, dear boy. Gods knows that your grandfather would have been very proud to have a grandson in the esteemed Kingsguard, said Uncle Georgie. But a snort of derision was heard from behind them. A northerner? Join the Kingsguard? Don't speak of such nonsense. In spite of it being the same nonsense as to why House Bramfield would wed with a small and savage house of the north. Asher turned furiously to the mounted Byrch knight whom dared to speak of him and mother's house in such a mocking manner. Come down from your horse, sir, and give voice once again to what you think of my house and my mother's house, or forever be considered a coward. Asher snapped. The Byrch knight took off his helm and Asher saw a fat and unattractive man with thinning hair underneath the helm, look sneeringly down on Asher as though he was a pile of shit his horse had just unleashed. Impertinent northern savage scum, he replied before riding closer towards him. It was then that Asher ran towards the Byrch fool and grabbed him from his saddle and threw him onto the ground. I challenge you, sir. Accept my challenge or let it be known by all that you are a coward. Asher demanded with a grin. He stood up and drew his sword. He furiously pointed it at Asher. I have some manners to teach you, I see, northern bastard, he said. Sir Barman. Asher. Calm yourselves. Uncle Georgie tried to say. Back away, Bramfield. I always knew that your house was a house of cowards, but is it truly so that your nephew at least has some backbone, if not any brains? Asher drew his own sword and as Barman Byrch thrusted at him, Asher parried the thrust aside and cut across at his breastplate. The blow dented his breastplate. Asher continued and sliced across at his left greave. As he screamed, Asher kicked him in that greave and sharply elbowed him in the face. Both blows had forced him on his back. Asher smashed aside his sword, knocking it 10 feet from his grasp. He pointed his sword at his face, blooded from his nose, where Asher had elbowed him. Byrch stared in fury at Asher, but as he felt the cold steel of his sword against his chin, he quickly changed his attitude. "Apologize to my lord, Uncle Georgie. Now," Asher demanded. "Forgive me, Lord Bramfield. I am truly sorry for the untrue insults I had made in regards to you, your noble house and the house your fair sister married into," he said quickly and pathetically. "Now who's the one with a lack of backbone or brains?" Lucas 2. As beautiful a city that this may be, every day that I serve in the Kingsguard, I will always yearn for home at Raventree Hall, Lucas thought as he stepped onto the training yards of the White Sword Tower. Lucas had come expecting many other young knights and lords wish to join the storied Kingsguard with legendary knights in their ranks such as Barristan Selmy, Arthur Dane and Oswell Went. But as far as he could see, he was the only one stood there. He took a deep breath as he saw Sir Lyle Crickehall walk down the steps of the White Sword Tower and was followed by another man. The man was young, probably the same age as he. He was tall, muscular and with dirty blonde hair that reminded him of the Bramfields of Barleyhold. "Stand with the other young knight there," Sir Lyle instructed the other young man. He did as he was told whilst Sir Lyle drew a practice greatsword from a weapons rack. Lucas nodded to him as he approached, and he nodded back. Before either of them could introduce themselves to the other, Sir Lyle spoke. "Both of you are here because you chose to be here. You want to join the Kingsguard. But if you think that you are ready, you have another thing coming. There is more to being a Kingsguard than simply being a good fighter. You must uphold your vows as a knight, know the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, and above all, stay true to your vows as protectors of the royal house, the king and queen and all their heirs," he said as he waved his great sword around, pointing it at the two of them as he spoke. Then he stopped his waving as he pointed his sword at Lucas. "Sir Lucas Blackwood. His Grace himself speaks of your talents at jousting and going up against the likes of even the Knight of the Flowers, my niece Ellen's favourite knight. And then there is you, Lord Asher Forrester. I have heard of your hunts for bandits, wildlings and mountain clansmen in the north, and of your duel with that piggish oaf barman Byrch." Lucas glanced at Asher Forrester, and noticed he had both a sword and an axe sheathed at his side. "He fights with a sword and an axe. I fight with a sword and a shield, and I've come across a few knights whom fight with 2 swords, but whom fights with a sword and an axe. Sir Lucas, take up a sword and shield and come fight me," said Sir Lyle. Lucas took up a practice sword and shield from the racks and faced the strong boar, whom stood ready with his great sword. Lucas thrust at him, swinging his shield at his center as he did so. The blow had managed to block his blow with his great sword and allowed Lucas to strike at his breastplate. Lucas blocked 3 blows from Sir Lyle before his brute strength holding his great sword knocked Lucas' shield from his grasp. Lucas dodged a mighty swing from Sir Lyle before their swords clashed together and Lucas swiveled around, hoping to cut across the strong boar's back. But the strong boar, as well as large and brutish, was fast and blocked his swing, and as their swords clashed, Lucas, still surprised, was disarmed by a parry from the strong boar, whom pointed his great sword at his chin. "You fight well, Sir Lucas. You are fast, but, when you see an opponent, you guess what he is capable of. You must test your opponent in the first few moments of your fight and gain an understanding of him before you can try and outthink him." "Yes, sir," said Lucas. Next, he turned to Asher Forrester. "Now, Forrester. I've come across many northerners. Ranging from grim and hardy Starks, cold and calculating Boltons and large and brutish Umbers. But what is said about the Forresters of Ironrath?" he asked. "A combination of all 3, sir," he replied. "We'll soon see, won't we?" replied the strong boar. Asher took up a sword and an axe from the weapons rack and faced Sir Lyle. "Never come across a man whom fights with both a sword and an axe," Sir Lyle commented. "The gods gave me 2 hands and both are good with weapons," so he replied before he simultaneously swung both weapons at the strong boar. Sir Lyle blocked the blows from both weapons, before Asher's axe clanged onto Sir Lyle's helm. The helm fell from his head and onto the sands of the training yard. Sir Lyle nodded, impressed, as he prepared himself for another attack from the second son of Lord Gregor Forrester. Asher sliced his axe at his great sword before trying to thrust his sword at Sir Lyle's breastplate. But Salal parried the axe aside before maneuvering his great sword aside and striking his sword down and then pointing his great sword at him, still armed with his axe. Asher held up his axe and dodged a mighty swing at his chest before he swung his axe at his great sword. Salal lost the grip on the sword with one hand, but still held on to it with his other. As Asher tried to strike down again, Salal maneuvered his great sword aside and then swung his great sword across, disarming him. "You fight very well, young northerner. Very well indeed. But until today, the only men you've fought and killed have been wildlings, bandits and mountain clansmen. Not much of a challenge, are they?" "Not in comparison to veteran knights, no," Sir Asher agreed. "Indeed. Which is why, whilst you two train for the King's Guard and will one day be appointed by His Grace, you shall train as often as you can and learn from myself and my sworn brothers. Always listen to us, for you can only learn from our experiences, just as we learned from our predecessors." Chapter 19, The Dark Dragon's Wings Unfurled. Chapter text. Triss 2. Triss grinned as he watched the Tiroshi army marching on Caraxes Road, named after Daemon Targaryen's dragon which had landed near it to confront an army of the Triarchy before the Dance of the Dragons. The Tiroshi army numbered 35,000 sellswords and slave soldiers press-ganged into Teosha's army. The Golden Company numbered 10,000 men, all elite men at arms, knights, sergeants and archers. And Triss, he knew, was the best of the entire company. Not just the best fighter, but also the best suited to be captain. "Black Fires have always commanded the Golden Company, and I shall soon be captain. And when I do, I will recruit more men and armies under my banner, so that all of Essos can see the resurrection of House Blackfyre, and all of Westeros shall see it also. And the damned Targaryen mad bastards can shit themselves when they hear of the great dark dragon coming upon them." Triss turned to Harry Strickland. "Send the infantry to block the road to Freorida Gate, with our archers on the cliff. Triss, you will lead the cavalry and smash into them, and force them to retreat onto the road towards Corsairs Bay. Once they retreat there, I will crush the remainder with our elephants," Harry explained. "How long until Triss comes along with the cavalry?" asked Black Balak. "When you decide. Blow on your horn and then he will come," Harry replied before glancing at Triss. Triss nodded in reply before turning to Balak. "I'll be there, my friend." "Have no worry," Triss reiterated. On Harry's command, they rode to their positions, and Triss rode to command the cavalry of the Golden Company. Though he couldn't see them as he quietly led the cavalry, he could hear their march, on towards the awaiting infantry. He turned to Drollo, a Dothraki horse archer and sellsword whom chose to join the Golden Company. "Take your men and keep an eye for their scouting parties. Spare none of you," see any Triss ordered in Dothraki. "I will," he replied as he fiddled with his large moustache and shouted to his fellow Dothraki. Triss unsheathed Blackfyre and held his shield up, eager to fight the Teoshes and fight for the city which had been his home for his childhood before he had left for the Golden Company. It was also where mother and father were, still living comfortably and happily in father's manse, he had purchased with coin grandfather Daemon had earned as captain of the Golden Company. "Triss," said Brendel. Triss broke from his thoughts as he turned to his second-in-command. "The battle begins," he said. Triss listened to the sounds of fighting and war horns blaring, but not the distinct war horn of Black Balak, which carried a sweet and musical tone to it, like all war horns of the Summer Isles. But it wasn't long before he could hear that very same war horn. "Form up! To the battle! For the Golden Company!" Triss roared as he raised Blackfyre for all his men to see. "For the Golden Company," they roared. "And for House Blackfyre." Triss led the cavalry down the hill and onto Caraxes Road, where he could see the Tiroshi army charging at the infantry of the company, forming a phalanx like the Giscari of old. "Charge!" Triss roared. Triss was the first to charge towards the Teoshes. With Blackfyre, he beheaded a man, unhorsed a rider with only his shield before he diagonally sliced a man in half. Still mounted, Triss stabbed, sliced and cut down many opponents as the cavalry of the Golden Company smashed into their rears. He grinned as he saw the panic amongst their men and saw how frightened their leaders and flag-bearers looked in the center of the army. "Retreat! Retreat for Corsairs Bay," one shouted. Falling straight into Harry's trap. Triss allowed them to retreat, deciding it would be easier to run down them as they contended with Harry and the elephants than here in a squashed battleground. Why don't we charge now? Impatiently asked Brendel. Because it'll be easier to slaughter them all as they face the elephants, Tris explained. Do we attack now? Asked Brendel. Yes, now, Tris replied when he spotted them all cross onto the road for Corsair's Bay, the view from which one could see the Stepstone Islands and even the furthest eastern point of Dawn. Tris charged towards the Teoshes, with his cavalry and knights following closely after him as they charged. He slaughtered many at the back whilst those at front had either been shot by archers or squashed by Harry and his small army of elephants. Tris grinned as the last of them futilely ran to escape the brutal battlefield. Another victory for the Golden Company. Tris roared as he raised Black Fear up high for them all to see. As they cheered, Tris grinned. With this victory, soon the Targaryens will hear of it. And when they do, they will find out that I am here. They will fear me, and rightly so. For one day soon, I will come for you, Aegon Targaryen, and what is rightfully mine. Elia 6. I gather that you've been spending time courting with the lovely Lady Sansa Stark, Elia enquired teasingly. Elia beamed at seeing her son blush at the mere mention of the fair eldest daughter of Bran Stark. My dear boy, so eager to have a love match. I truly hope that he has found one with her. The thing I never truly did have with Rhaegar. Yes, mother. I have. She is very beautiful and kind, said Aegon. Rollo chuckled at seeing Aegon blush and stammer as he spoke of her. Yes, she is, dear. Will you invite her to dine with us tonight? Asked Rollo. Would that be permissible, grandmother? Asked Aegon. Of course it would be. Just be as courteous and kind as she is and invite her, said Elia. As Aegon left their table in the Red Keep's gardens, Elia nodded when she turned and faced her good mother. It would seem that you were right. Sansa Stark may very well be our best option in Aegon's queen, said Rollo. I quite agree. And Varys says that the Northerners' power has grown significantly since the rebellion. Especially with the building of the Kalin Canal, the mining in the hills and mountains of the north, turning the neck into another bready biscuit for the realm and building new castles and keeps and restoring old ruins across the north, Elia added. Indeed. And an alliance with the north does right a great many wrongs which House Targaryen has inflicted on House Stark, as well as gaining allies from the Tullys and the Arryns. However, we still have to think of the Lannisters and the Tyrells. For Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell will be the most annoyed at Aegon's lady love, Rollo wisely said, frowning at the mere mention of the former. She's right, as much as I hate to admit it, we will need to secure Aegon's reign by allying with those two, Elia thought with annoyance. Especially at how Tywin Lannister had given the order for the city to be sacked and for she and her family to die. All whilst Mace Tyrell feasted on the finest cuisines and boasting of claiming Randall Tarlis' victory at Ashford whilst Storm's End was being starved. What would be the best course of action then, in regards to those two houses? Asked Elia. Rollo hummed as she considered this. Well, strangely enough, Mace Tyrell's eldest son, Willers, only a few years older than your daughter, is unwed. Perhaps he can be wed to Rhaenys. Willers Tyrell. Yes, by all accounts he is a gentle and sweet young man with a fondness for dogs, horses and hawks. He will be good to Rhaenys, Elia thought as she remembered all of what Oberyn had told her about the heir to Highgarden. Rhaenys. Yes, she can be wed to him. But what of the Lannisters? Tywin, in spite of everything, still wants his blood on the Iron Throne, said Elia. Why can't that cruel bastard just die for all that he has done and all that he has tried to do? Elia inwardly asked herself. We can discuss it with the man himself. But, only after the betrothal is announced. This way, he cannot try to bribe us with the imaginary gold the mines of the Westerlands can produce, Rollo suggested. Yes. If he did try and offer gold, he would only borrow said gold from the Iron Bank of Bravos. Chapter 20, Planning Ahead. Chapter Text. Theon 3. Theon stood outside of the king's solar, anxiously waiting to be allowed inside by the king, whilst two king's guard remained stood outside. He knew them both from when they had come to Pike and had defeated the Crow's Eye. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower and Sir Lyle Hall. You were only a boy when last I saw of you, my lord, remarked Sir Gerald Hightower. I, Lord Commander. I'm now a man who seeks to do what is best for his country, said Theon earnestly. And what is it you feel is best for the Iron Islands, Lord Greyjoy? Asked the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Do you think me a fool that would dare to try and attack the king? To save the Iron Islanders from centuries-old ignorance and reform their way of life, he said. He hummed as he looked at Theon. Not what your father would have wanted, he said pointedly. No, but it is what my grandfather wanted. And what my uncle Roderick taught me to believe in, said Theon. He nodded with a slight smile, as though he now believed in Theon's sincerity. Lord Commander, allow Lord Greyjoy inside, said the king. He opened the door. Theon took a deep breath before entering inside the king's solar, and the door was shut behind him. Your Grace, Theon greeted with a bow as he faced both the king and the Queen Regent. My lord. I am pleased that you have come for the coronation, Lord Greyjoy, said King Aegon. Though, your Grace, I won't deny that many of my bannermen and my own family were surprised by my choice. For many believe that I would be more like my late father, Theon replied. In what way? Asked the Queen Regent, with a curious smile on her beautiful and exotic face. I don't know if your eunuch spy master told you, my queen, but my father, as well as many others, wanted the Iron Islands to be an independent kingdom once again and to try and carve out a larger kingdom like how other Ironborn dynasties had done, Theon explained. She already knows, Theon guessed from the look on her face. But what makes you different than your father, Lord Greyjoy, asked the Queen Regent. Because I know that any war with the mainland of Westeros, when it is all united under a king's rule, is one that cannot be won. And I want to change the Ironborn and end the old way. We are very glad to hear your ambition, Lord Greyjoy. But what is it which you intend to change about the culture of the Iron Islands, which has stood the test of time and survived after 3 centuries of House Targaryen's rule over the Iron Islands? Asked the king. He speaks with wisdom and knowledge befitting a man older than he, Theon thought Uncle Roderick might say. I intend to end all pillaging and reaving, the taking of salt wives and thralls, and the constant fighting which all Ironborn seek to live for and sail to all shores in search of. But I am aware of the distrust that many of the lords of the mainlands have for the Iron Islands after centuries and millennia of raids, he explained. I see. Well, if you are so intent on changing the ways of the Iron Islanders, Lord Greyjoy, then perhaps there is an agreement that we can make, said the Queen Regent. Truly. This could be it. Name it, my queen, said Theon. There are 2 threats to the small folk of the eastern coastlines of the realm. The pirates of the Stepstones are one. And the other is Sisterman sea raiders and Tiroshi slavers whom serve the masters of Slavers Bay in Essos. Do what you can to crush both threats, and the king shall see to it that the Iron Islands and House Greyjoy are suitably rewarded and publicly acknowledged for it, said the Queen Regent. Theon smiled as he nodded at hearing her proposition. Whilst this may not be reaving, it will both give the Ironborn an enemy to fight, for them to fight alongside the other kingdoms of Westeros, to see just how strong and powerful they all are in times of war, and for the Targaryens to not only reward us, but to publicly acknowledge us. It will be done, my queen. My king, said Theon before bowing and shaking the king's hand. I'll write to Uncle Roderick and inform him. But first, I will need to tell Asha. Robb 3. Robb smiled as he held her hand, walking with her to the sparring yard. That's a very pretty necklace, he noticed. She shyly blushed as she reached up for the necklace. Thank you. The ladies of my house wear this, my lord, she replied. Robb smiled charmingly at her, a smile similar to what he saw father do to mother when trying to convince her the benefit of whatever he was suggesting. Come now, I must insist that you call me Robb, he replied as he rubbed his thumb over her soft and gentle hand, which only seemed to make her shiver in spite of the warm climate of the capital. Very well, Robb, she replied coquettishly. But then she grimaced when she looked behind him. Is something wrong? Robb asked, turning around. Mother, she replied with annoyance. Why is that an issue? I thought that your father consented to us courting, asked Robb. Father did, but mother did not, Robb. She is a law unto herself, she explained. I'm so sorry, Robb, but I should go. You have no need to apologize. Shall we meet again soon? Robb offered politely. Yes, I should like that, she said with a sweet smile on her heart-shaped face. Robb decided to leave her yearning for more by taking her hand and kissing it. She blushed furiously as Robb let go of her hand and she nervously fiddled with her curled chestnut hair. Always works, Robb thought with a grin before he turned around to see an old friend. Asha. What's this I hear about you wanting to be in the Kingsguard? Robb called to Asher Forrester on the sparring yard of the Red Keep. "Ah, just bored with life as a second son of a lord," Stark Asher replied as the two shook hands. "He's one of the best fighters in the north. They'll be lucky to have him in their ranks, and to remind them what honor is and what being a knight is and not a loyal dog as they were for Aerys and Roerger." As the two sparred, with Robb wielding a great sword and Asher wielding a sword and an axe, Robb noticed a few other young men fighting across from them, as well as a large audience of young ladies and little children coming to watch. He recognized his cousin, Harold Arryn, as well as Quentyn Martell and Loras Tyrell. All three fought with swords and shields, though Loras Tyrell was clearly better. Loras Tyrell defeated both of them, which had earned him claps and cheers from the adoring southern ladies whom stared moon-eyed at him and little children whom wanted to be like him. "Care for a spar, sir?" asked the Knight of the Flowers, turning to Asher. Asher turned to him with a smirk. "I'm no sir." The third son of Mace Tyrell looked surprised. "But you train for the Kingsguard, do you not?" he asked. I do. But I have not been knighted yet. I would rather be knighted by earning it for doing one thing noteworthy." "But Sir Loras, I will spar with you," said Asher as he turned to face the arrogant and favorite son of the Lord of Highgarden. Asher walked to where he stood and without warning, he sliced both his weapons at him, knocking him back from the power of the attacks. But then he thrusted his sword at Asher's side. Asher skillfully parried the thrust with his sword and disarmed him with an uppercut blow with his axe. The watching ladies and children gasped at seeing their hero be disarmed this quickly, but admirably, he still stood ready for a fight with his shield. Though a people-pleaser and lives for the adoration of the small folk, he is no dunce with a blade, Robb conceded to him. Asher, clearly not underestimating him, struck his axe at him, whilst keeping his sword back and ready. The Knight of the Flowers swung his shield across at Asher, but then he struck both weapons down on the shield. The dual blows knocked Loras Tyrell's shield down onto the sands and Asher pointed both his weapons at his neck. "I yield," the Knight of the Flowers conceded, to the shock of the spectators. Defeating one of the best fighters in the realm and not many know his name. Asher has great potential as a Kingsguard knight." "Brother," called Alaric. Robb turned to see his youngest brother calling to him. Alaric." "What's happened, little brother?" asked Robb. "Mother and father want to see you, me, Bern and Rickon in their quarters," he explained. What could this be about? Robb put down his practice greatsword, drank from a basin of water and turned to see Asher having another duel with Loras Tyrell. Arriving at mother and father's quarters in the maiden vault, with Bern and Rickon joining them, Robb saw their parents standing at the balcony overlooking the Red Keep's gardens. "Good. You're all here. Now we must discuss the future each of you shall have in the north," said father. "What do you mean, father?" asked Bern. "Well, your father and I have just received a raven from Maester Lewin. He says that the works in Moat Cailin and Wolf's Den are complete. As well as the new castle built in the new gift, called Snowhill," mother explained. Do they intend to award these 3 places to my brothers?" Robb wondered. Father turned to Alaric. "Al, you are to be Lord of Moat Cailin, and you shall take up the name Kelstark. Bern shall be Lord of Wolf's Den and with the name Seastook. And as for you, Rickon, you shall be Lord of Snowhill and have the name Ristook," said father as he handed deeds of lordship to each of them. Robb beamed at his younger brothers and patted them on the back for now being lords with their own castles. "The names and seats you shall take up once you are old enough, but for now those names don't mean anything. However, when you are old enough and are made lords, it will be up to you all to show the world what each of them mean and give your children a reason to be proud of your houses," said father. At last, father turned to Robb. "I understand you've been courting a southern lady here." "Aye, father. She is Jane Westerling," Robb replied. "Do you wish to wed her?" mother asked. I do," Robb replied. "Brandon 4. "And whom will we wed, father?" asked Alaric. "That'll be decided nearer the time, but with your own approval first," said Brandon before all his sons left, all excited that they would be lords with their own family seats. "We'll take them to each of their new homes, so that they can get a good understanding of them." "And whom shall they marry, Bran?" asked Cat. "Oh, you and your southern ambitions." "Depends. For most daughters of the north are of age right now or are soon to be betrothed, like Aelys Karstark to Darin Hornwood. We can wed Alaric to Myra Forrester or Edara Tallheart, he suggested. And then there is Byrne and Rukon. Perhaps, suitable brides might be found in the south. Caitlin offered. Gods, she'll tire me out with this southern horseshit, he thought as he ran his fingers through his long hair. Do you have any suggestions, Cat? Though they would have to be from minor families, from doubt that the likes of Mace Tyrell would want his beautiful daughter to be content with being lady of somewhere such as Moat Cailin, Brandon pointed out, hoping that this would make her see sense. Perhaps from the Vale, the Riverlands or even the Reach, she offered. Like whom, Cat? Bran asked. Please don't mention those fuck-ugly phrase. Bethany Blackwood for one from the Riverlands. Zilla Royce is another from the Vale. And perhaps a Hightower or a Tarly from the Reach. They have no shortage of beautiful daughters, she suggested. Brandon Stark. Still as roguish as ever. Brandon smirked at hearing that beautiful voice. He turned to see Ned walking towards them whilst holding the hand of his beautiful and stunning wife. Roguish. Always, Brandon replied. He walked to the lady and lord consort of Starfall. Brandon hugged Ned and patted him in the shoulder whilst Cat and Ash greeted each other amicably. So, how is life in Starfall, Ned? Brandon asked. The climate is inescapable. Though our baths together do cool me down, and warm me up straight afterward, Ned replied with an unashamed grin. What the fuck? Ned's bragging about how much he fucks his wife. Gods, Ashura, what have you done to my young and innocent brother? Brandon laughed heartily at Ned's comment. And where are your children? Asked Brandon. They are meeting the Targaryens. And Jon is spending time with his betrothed, he explained. His betrothed? Good for him. A handsome lad like he. Whom is the lucky lady? I would say maiden, but she is likely to be Dornish. Princess Arianne Martell. They wed when we return to Dorne, said Ash. Arianne Martell. Gods, the stories they tell of that woman. Jon will be a very busy boy satisfying a lustful and voluptuous Dornish princess such as she. Not that he would complain, Brandon thought naughtily. But if Jon is betrothed to her and will wed her, does that mean that he remains the heir of Starfall? Asked Cat. No, he will be prince consort of Dorne. Edric, our second son, is now heir to Starfall and is betrothed to Jenlyn Fowler, Ned explained. Chapter 21, A Vote to be Captain. Chapter text. Theon 4. Soon after sending the letter to Uncle Roderick and informing him of the agreements he had made with the King and the Queen Regent, Theon found Asher looking down from the balcony at Blackwater Bay and at the sea beyond the harbour, with ships of all flags and banners coming and going. Why do you want to do this, Theon? This is not the way of the Ironborn, Asher exclaimed when she turned to face him. Then tell me, sister, what good is it that we keep to the old way? Dagon Greyjoy and the Red Kraken before him tried to claim independence and restore the old way, and look how they both ended up. It's been less than 10 years since the clash of the Krakens. And if we went to war with the mainlanders, we would all die, Theon explained, tired of having this conversation with her. You would have us shit on all of what our ancestors did for some pretty words and gold. Doing things like mainlanders do and pay the gold price for everything, she asked with a sneer in her voice. I would have the Iron Islands strengthened and saved from the graves we have dug ourselves. Asher, I want the Iron Islands to adapt to the world we live in, and not for it or for House Greyjoy to perish. The mainlanders are weak, Asher pointed out. When united, they can number 370,000 men and less than 1,000 ships, especially with the Northerners and Rivermen building merchant and war fleets. How long before the Dornish and the Vale do the same? What hope is there in such a stupid war for no other reason than to cling to the old way? Theon asked, angry that she was not seeing sense. If she cannot be convinced, how can I convince my bannermen? Lord and Lady Greyjoy. Theon and Asher turned around and Theon recognized the two uncles of the king, Doran Martell, Prince of Dorne, and his younger brother, Prince Oberyn, the Red Viper. Prince Doran. Prince Oberyn, Theon greeted, bowing his head to both of them. I hope we are not interrupting, but I have a proposition for you and for House Greyjoy that you may be interested in, said the Prince of Dorne. If it benefits the Iron Islands, then I will be very interested, Theon thought as he wondered what this could be about. I am all ears, Prince Doran said Theon eagerly. My sister, the Queen Regent, has informed us of your willingness to crush the pirates of the Stepstones and of your personal desire for change in the Iron Islands, said the Lord of Sunspear. That is true, said Theon. Well, Lord Greyjoy, my proposition is this: together, the Iron Fleet and the Dornish army crush the pirates of the Stepstones. Afterwards, the Iron Islands shall be permitted to build trading posts in Dorne to exchange resources between our countries. The Iron Islands would gain Dornish foods and wines in exchange for your iron and quarried stone. Also, for the Iron Islands to build a good fleet of warships so that we can better protect our merchant ships from pirates. Do we have an agreement? Theon considered this. Uncle Roderick would be best at establishing trading posts across Dorne. And with Dorne on side, and the king expressing public gratitude, it will gain us more trust from the rest of Westeros and help them see that we are evolving. Which is what we need if the Iron Islands is to adapt. Perhaps, I can become as successful as Corlys Velaryon. Agreed, Prince Doran, said Theon before the two shook hands. The two Dornish princes left, and Asha frowned as she faced Theon. The Red Viper told me what his brother intends, and from your handshake, I saw that you agreed. You seek turn a nation of warriors and seafarers into a nation of milksops and merchants. I seek to save the Iron Islands from centuries of endless war. War and reaving have been our culture and way of life for too long, and now we have to adapt with the rest of the world, Theon replied with fervent conviction. Tris 3. Magister Malar Orthes was sat on a large and cushioned chair, which had been specifically bought for their potential benefactors, whom were lazy, sweating and grossly overweight rich men. Though underneath this man's large frame, Tris thought that he would crush the chair he sat on. The Battle of Caraxes Road Bay so weakened Tioche that Lysa shall now take possession of all of Corsairs Bay and perhaps further in the disputed lands. Ah, but you all care not for lies and politics or advancement. You care for gold, and you shall have it. A great deal of it, he said as he ate from a large plate of roasted lamb legs, which he did not share with any others in the tent. And how much is this, Magister? Asked Franklin Flowers. 5 million gelesses, he explained. 5 million. Perfect. The gold is being transported to Lysa for counting as we speak. It should arrive here 2 days from now, he explained as Rolly refilled his wine cup. The Magister had wasted no time in draining the entire cup before holding it out to be refilled whilst he finished devouring another lamb's leg. The conclave of Magisters would also like to offer its condolences on the loss of your captain, and the hope that brave Captain Strickland's successor shall remain a steadfast friend and ally of Lysa the Lovely in these troubling times and in our eternal conflict with the thieving cities of Myr and Tioche, he continued. There was a shared frown amongst the officers of Golden Company at the reminder of Harry's death. He had been filled full of arrows by Tiroshi archers in the battle. And with the captain of the Golden Company dead, it meant that the officers had to choose whom would next be chosen as captain. The only time when there hadn't been a chosen captain was when Grandfather Demon had been murdered by Maelys the Monstrous and murdered any whom dared to oppose him. Tris had felt that the time was now. The time had come for him to at least be named as captain of the Golden Company and begin the first steps in at last claiming his birthright and ending the decadent and murdering Targaryen dynasty, which had murdered Black Phares, especially the bastard Brynden Rivers. Magister Orthes was slowly escorted by his unsullied guards to the tent which had been prepared for his arrival. Tris appointed himself as one of the contenders. The Black Phares have always commanded the Golden Company. The title of captain might as well be hereditary, just like the Valerius of Driftmark and the small council position of master of ships. In the center of the camp, Dick and Wilco impaled the Golden Skull's banner in the soil and all contenders stood around the main battle banner of the Golden Company. Tris stood in front of Grandfather's skull. From there he saw the skull of his murderer. Maelys' skull was larger than all the others, malformed, and below it was the fist-sized skull of his twin brother. My head will not be boiled down and my skull dipped in gold. When I die, I will die king of the 7 kingdoms and be buried in the great September of Baelor. Gorys, the Volantene paymaster of the company, spoke first. Brothers, friends and comrades. At the Battle of Caraxes Road 600 good men of the company died. But among them was Captain Harry Strickland. Now we must choose our next captain. The contenders are Franklin Flowers, Laswell Peake and Tris Blackfyr. Whom will start? Tris decided to let the other two speak first, so that as he spoke last, all would resonate more with his words and forget all about what the other two said. Franklin held his hand in the banner, standing in front of the skull of Miles Toyne. My brothers of the company, I would name myself. For many years, I have served in the company, under Miles Toyne and then Harry Strickland. And I would be proud to lead us to further glories and gold across the world, he said. His speech was met with enthusiastic applause from some. Next was the exiled nobleman of House Peak, standing in front of Harry's recently placed skull. Good men of the company. Choose me as captain and I will have us do as we have been doing since Harry began his tenure. As of now, the Golden Company is the most powerful sellsword army in the known world, and I would reinforce this fact and for all of Essos to fear us. There were some cheers accompanying the applause and some chanted Peak. Captain Peak. Now it was Triz's turn. This is it. Triz held on to the Golden Skull's banner and faced the assembled men gathered around the banner. Comrades of the company. Whilst none mourn Harry Strickland more than I, he was weak. He was content with the Golden Company being like all other sellsword companies of the world. I would not. For we already are the greatest company. We live in an age where across the known world, Valyrian warlords are content to conquer and carve out their own kingdoms. Just imagine what gold we shall take and earn from helping these warlords. Merely support me, and you will see gold and glory that you have only ever dreamt of. It is ironic how one of those Valyrian warlords whom is intent on conquest is I, though I already have a claim, he thought. All gathered clapped and cheered for him and loud voices chanted Blackfyr. Captain Blackfyr. The ovations he received were greater understanding comparisons to his rivals. It is done. Another Blackfyr is captain of the Golden Company. Chapter 22, Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Chapter text. Aegon III. Aegon stood in front of his family and all assembled nobility of the realm in the great September of Baelor. He saw His Holiness, the High Septon, walking towards him, followed by a Septon whom was holding the crown of Aegon the Conqueror on a red velvet cushion, the crown recently been recovered by the efforts of Uncle Oberyn. Aegon knelt before the altar and His Holiness. Aegon of House Targaryen, do you vow to serve the realm as its servant and never use your throne and crown for your own personal gain? He asked with a booming voice. I do. And to listen to all of your subjects from commoners to nobles and to guide them through times of poverty and times of prosperity. I do, Aegon replied as he bowed his head down and His Holiness took the crown from the cushion. Do you promise to teach your children and heirs these very things, that they may teach theirs and serve the realm and its people? I do. To do so from this day until your last. I do. And as Aegon spoke his last reply, the High Septon placed the crown on his head. Then rise as Aegon of House Targaryen, sixth of your name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the realm. Rise, your grace, and be greeted by your subjects. Aegon rose and turned to face all gathered, whom clapped for he as he walked down the aisle. He saw mother and grandmother beam proudly at him. Rhaenys winked at him. Aunt Daenerys, Uncle Viserys, Uncle Oberyn and Uncle Doran all smiled as they clapped for him. But then he saw her. Sansa. She smiled proudly for him as he walked down the aisle and she blushed when their eyes met. Aegon enjoyed all of the times they had been courting around the Red Keep, and how kind, sweet, sincere and honest she always was to him, when most ladies he met would only tell him what they thought he would want to hear. But Aegon knew they wanted only to be his queen. Whereas Sansa seemed more interested in being his love than his queen. Aegon beamed as he stood overlooking the crowds of small folk below. And he waved at them as they cheered, clapped and chanted King Aegon. King Aegon. King Aegon. He exhaled slowly as he took in their approval. In his childhood years and adolescence, Aegon and Rhaenys had always accompanied mother on her charitable trips around the capital, including granting royal patronage to the construction of sewers, aqueducts, public bathhouses, taverns, orphanages and improved housing. And so, the small folk of King's Landing knew very well whom he was and that he was not the type to idly loiter in the Red Keep and fatten himself with gluttony and lust. And at Maegor's Holdfast, a grand feast was being held to celebrate the coronation. Aegon, tired of speeches, protocol and loud noises in general, decided to go to bed and recover. More of this, and I'll get a headache, he thought. He drank from a cup of Dornish red and as the troubadours began to play a joyful and celebratory tune, he stood up and planned to leave early. But no sooner as he had stepped down from the dais where the main table was sat on, that he found himself swarmed by Mace, Aeleri, Loras and Margaery Tyrell. "Lord and Lady Tyrell," Aegon said with an impatient smile. "Your Grace, we wish to congratulate you on your coronation and we wish you a long and prosperous reign," said Mace Tyrell. "That's very kind of you, Lord Tyrell." "My thanks," said Aegon. "What did I even do in the coronation other than say a few words? And I hope, Your Grace, that now as king, you will take it upon yourself to be wed to a good woman whom will be a good queen for you and for the realm," said Lady Aeleri whilst her daughter smiled coyly at that. "You just couldn't be more obvious if you had tried. I can't seem to get anywhere without someone trying to hint at this." "I still have a lot to get through tonight," Lady Tyrell, Aegon replied diplomatically before keenly trying to escape. But as soon as he had escaped from the Tyrells, he had come face to face with the man whom had ordered for Rhaenys, mother, grandmother, Uncle Viserys and Aunt Daenerys to be so brutally murdered. Lord Lannister, Aegon stiffly greeted with harshness in his voice as he faced he and his granddaughter, the Lady Myrcella. "Your Grace. My congratulations for the coronation," he said. "Thank you," said Aegon with a raised brow and crossing his arms. "My granddaughter Myrcella wished to spend a moment with you," he said, whilst his granddaughter innocently smiled at him. For all the sins of her grandfather, Myrcella was not at fault for them. Never blame a son for the crimes of his father, Mother had wisely told him. "Of course, Lady Myrcella, would you care for a dance?" he asked, hearing the troubadours play a new tune, which many had started to dance along to, including Mother and Baelor Hightower. "I would love to, Your Grace," she said with an adorable and beaming smile. "She has such a precious innocence. I hope that she never loses it and that her evil bastard of a grandfather does not corrupt her as he has done to her mother." Aegon hoped to dance briefly with her and not be swamped with many other suitors, for he was still exhausted from the day's events. "Your Grace, how are you?" Aegon looked down at her, surprised at her question. "I am fine, considering, my lady," he replied. "I only ask because you seem so tired," she explained. "Well, you have the truth of it, Lady Myrcella. All of the preparations and the rehearsals for this day have tired me out, as well as hosting massive feasts," he replied, hoping to not offend her, for she had surprised him with how kind she was being. "I am sorry for all of this taking a strain on you, Your Grace, and can assure you that this will all end soon and you will be glad to see the back of all of us," she said with a slight giggle. Aegon couldn't help but chuckle at this before continuing to dance with Myrcella. Catelyn 4. "The Crown Prince is now our king," Catelyn thought as she and Bran walked together, escorted by Catelyn's cousin, Sir Oswell, to the Queen's Solar, which was still inhabited by Elia Martell, whom was now Queen Mother, as opposed to being Queen Regent. She and Bran had been invited by her and her good mother, Rhaella Targaryen. Stood at the door were Sir Alliser Thorne and Sir Lylcra Kehor. "My Queen, Lord and Lady Stark are here at your request," said Sir Alliser after he had knocked on the door. "Allow them inside," Sir Alliser said, the gentle and kindly voice of Elia Martell. "You may see her as a fragile, gentle and kind woman, but that is all a mere mask for her inner resolve and steel," Bran had once told her, a statement corroborated by father. They were allowed inside and invited to sit down opposite from the mother and grandmother of the king. "Bran, Catelyn, thank you very much for coming," said the Queen Mother. "I forget how friendly Bran is with them," Catelyn thought, whilst also reminding herself of how close her good brother and his wife were to the Targaryens, because of Ashera Dayne's past as a lady-in-waiting to Elia Martell. "Not at all, Elia. Though I can only come to one answer as why we are here," said Bran. Though Catelyn was used to Bran and all Northerners coming straight to the point, she feared that the Targaryen royals were not the same. But surprisingly, they both smiled in spite of Bran's straightforwardness. "Well, the king has made it no secret with how much he adores the company of the Lady Sansa, and so we would offer for her to wed him," said the Queen Dowager. Catelyn could feel her heart beating unusually quickly at those very words and she inhaled as she searched for the best thing to say. Sansa has said how much she has enjoyed their courting and what she feels towards our king. As a father, I am glad that she has found a love match in a lad whom feels the same way as she. But, as a Lord of Winterfell, I ask what agreements are there to be made in this betrothal?" Bran asked. "Well, as the Lady Sansa is 6 moons from turning 5 and 10, we would offer for her to ward here and learn what it means to be queen and spend time with her betrothed and our family." in exchange for a dowry of 100,000 gold dragons and a discounted toll for passage through the Kalin Canal, the North is free to make its own exclusive trading agreements with foreign nations as well as a discounted tax on northern trading goods, said the Queen Mother. It is as Bran said. Discounted use of the Kalin Canal is the first thing on all minds, Catelyn thought before turning to Bran. He turned to her and they shared a nod. This discount, for both House Stark and House Targaryen, how long will it last? Asked Catelyn. 5 years for both, replied the Queen Dowager. Bran and she shared a nod again. This is agreeable, Elia, Ruller. And when will the announcement be made? Asked Bran. At tonight's feast. The king himself will announce it, said Elia. And leave no chance for the likes of Tywin Lannister or Mace Tyrell to try and ingratiate themselves. Elia 7. After Bran and Catelyn had left, she and Ruller discussed what next. Now that Daenerys is betrothed to Fortis Baratheon, that secures the Stormlands. And once Rhaenys is wed to Willas Tyrell, that will secure the Reach. And with Aegon's marriage to Sansa, it will secure the North, the Riverlands and the Vale, said Elia. And what of the Greyjoy boy? Do you think he is sincere in his ambitions to reform the Iron Islands and change the ways of the Ironborn? Asked Ruller. I do. And my brothers have made a trading deal with him. Varys has discovered that he has sent a letter to his uncle, Roderick Harlaw, to take charge in establishing Iron Islander trading posts in Dorne, even saying that this is the first step in saving the Iron Islands from ancient ignorance. Theon Greyjoy may prove a useful ally in his dedication to reforming the Ironborn and his desire for the realm to see his country as an equal. But there is also the Westerlands, as much as I hate to say it, said Ruller. But then, Elia came up with an idea. I think we should approach Jaime. Approach him and arrange a marriage between he and Margaery Tyrell. With this and their children from the match, perhaps even a daughter, could be wed to Aegon and Sansa's eldest son, Elia suggested. Ruller smiled and patted Elia on the shoulder. Very good, my dear. Very good indeed. Aegon is fortunate to have you as his mother, she said. There is more. I think we should award Summerhall to Viserys, as his family seat, and give him permission to form his own house, whilst putting aside all claims to the Iron Throne, of course. I agree. I will bring it up to Viserys, said Ruller. And later, at the feast that night, Elia whispered to Aegon. This is it. Be brave. You are king now, she whispered affectionately. I will, mother. Thank you, he replied sweetly. Elia gently rubbed his shoulder as she used to when he was still a child before he cleared his throat in nervousness. Aegon stood up and faced the gathered nobility from the north to her homeland of Dorne. My lords and ladies. Friends and family. I would like to part with you all by saying my thanks for coming for my coronation and on my first few days as king. Elia beamed proudly at him whilst the nobility all applauded him. The clapping continued before he raised his hand for silence. But now, I would like to extend an invitation to you all and eagerly await your return to our capital 6 moons from now, when I shall be wed to the fair and beautiful Lady Sansa of House Stark, he proudly announced, though she noticed a blush on his face as he said it. He's so cute when he blushes, Elia thought with a giggly smile. But Elia giggled when she clapped and saw the reactions of the Lannisters and the Tyrells. She resisted the urge to burst out laughing at the faces of Cersei and Tywin Lannister and Mace and Margaery Tyrell. Elia looked at Olenna Tyrell and then at Jaime Lannister. I'll speak with Olenna Tyrell on a marriage between Willas and Rhaenys. And then, I'll speak to Jaime in a marriage between he and Margaery. By tomorrow, when they have gotten over their bitterness. Chapter 23, The Lands of the Long Summer. Chapter text. Lucas 3. As part of their training as Kingsguard, both Lucas and Asha were expected to know all of the Red Keep and all of King's Landing. And now, both Asha and Lucas were accompanying the newly crowned king, Lucas' friend Aegon, on his first charitable trip around the city as king. They went with Sir Arthur and Sir Barristan. Since their first day of training in the White Sword Tower, the two continually sparred with each other as well as all knights of the Kingsguard. The Kingsguard knights all seemed different. Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Arthur and Sir Oswell were the most zealous in their duties, to regain the trust of the Queen Mother, as Sir Luwin had described it, for she made it clear that she had no faith nor trust in them when they had spent all of Robert's rebellion guarding Lyanna Stark. Sir Luwin, as great uncle to the king, was the closest one to the king, Princess Rhaenys and the Queen Mother. Sir Barristan was simply the most honorable and chivalric knight of them all, to Lucas. Sir Alisa was dedicated and honorable and made it no secret his distaste for the Lannisters and all they tried to do to the city. And Sir Lyle was the most eager for glory and earning it, to write in detail in the White Book. Lucas enjoyed being a knight and took pride in his knighthood, in spite of the fact that knights and knighthoods were of the Seven and the Andals, and not of the old gods or the first men. Lucas had earned his knighthood after winning a consecutive string of 5 tourneys across the Riverlands. Asher, on the other hand, seemed to be honorable, but enjoyed fighting more than anything, and he was not even knighted yet, which he said that he wanted when he did something to earn it, which Lucas respected, for he felt that it was too easy for men to be knighted in this day and age. But in spite of his wild and rowdy nature of his soon-to-be sworn brother, Lucas was glad that they worshipped the old gods. "I'm sure that our future queen will be glad to have a fellow northerner in the King's Guard and that the 3 of us keep to the old gods," Lucas thought as he watched the king gave an architect royal patronage to build a tailor in Flea Bottom. Tris 4. "Captain, I have news that I thought might be of interest to you," said Lysander, the Lysan Valyrian with purple-painted fingernails and with earnings that made him look more of a pirate than a sellsword or even the spymaster of the Golden Company. Tris looked up from his desk where he looked at letters. "Oh. And what news is this?" asked Tris. "Aegon Targaryen has been crowned king. And it is said that he is now wed to Sansa Stark," he replied. "How desperate is he for stability that he weds into the family that his father and grandfather sought to destroy. Whilst dragons cannot return, Westeros shall soon see the return of the Black Dragon and feel its wrath and fire. Does it pain you, for I know I would be pained by the news? Knowing that the Iron Throne, which 5 generations of your family have sought to win, still remains under the asses of the inbred Targaryens," asked Lysander. "Trying to test my mettle, Lysander? You'll have to try harder than that," Tris thought. "Not my current concern," Lysander said. Tris. "At least not yet. Not when we have a potential benefactor coming," he continued. "Indeed," said Lysander, with a nod, though he didn't sound too convinced by Tris' words, nor did he look it. But they were interrupted when someone entered his tent. "Captain, he is here," said Tris' squire, Dagon Caheres. "Bring him inside," said Tris before nodding to Lysander. He left the tent and soon after he had left, their guest arrived, accompanied by Dagon, whom offered them both a cup of Lysan wine. As the 2 drank, Tris gestured for Dagon to leave, leaving Tris free to speak with their guest. Their guest was Lysan nobleman, Vigor Galenios. "Lord Galenios, how is it that the captain of the Golden Company can help you?" asked Tris. "I heard that you were in the market for benefactors, including Valyrian warriors whom seek to crown themselves a king with a kingdom they have earned through blood and steel," he asked. "I am, so long as the price is good and the conditions are not impossible," said Tris. "Well then, you will be pleased to know, that I have such a proposition for you and for Golden Company. I seek to conquer the city-states of the lands of Long Summer," he replied. "The lands of Long Summer. The cities of Mantries, Illyria, Tolus, Porosh and Oros," Tris thought ambitiously. "And what does the company gain from this undertaking?" asked Tris. "Millions in gold pieces when I am crowned king and rule the lands," he replied. Ambitious though he may be, he is honest and adventurous. And he would know better than to make an enemy of the Golden Company." "Agreed," said Tris before they clinked drinks together. Asher 3. "A northerner as our queen. About fucking time. Now that the Targaryens don't wed brother and sister for no other reason than Valyrian purity, they should stick to wedding to the great houses. These been an Arryn queen and 2 Martell queens and at last, there will be a Stark queen." Asher felt great pride that the future queen was the fair Sansa of House Stark, whom was also a close friend of Myra. Which was why he was seeking after her in the Red Keep now that some of the nobilities of the realm were returning home. He had only met Lady Sansa once before. It had been in Winterfell at a grand feast Lord Brandon was hosting for all nobility of the north. Asher had gone with father, mother, Roderick, Myra, Ethan and Thalia to Winterfell to attend the feast. Both Roderick and Asher spent the entire time drinking and fighting with Robb Stark, Smalljan Umber, Domeric Bolton, the Karstark brothers, the Mormont sisters, Brandon Dustin, the Ryswell brothers, Cleisewin and Benfred Tallheart. But at a dance, after dancing with Myra, Asher had danced with Sangza and he found her to be one of the sweetest and kindest ladies he had ever met. And now, Asher felt that as a potential candidate for the Kingsguard, it was expected of him to protect Sangza as well as King Egon himself and of course the royal family. After he finished his first sparring session of the day with Lucas, Sir Barristan and Sir Arthur, Asher had gone to pray at the Godswood. But as he arrived, he found Lady Sangza already there, sat beneath the heart tree. He quietly approached the heart tree, trying not to disturb her prayers as he saw her looking at the face on the tree. "My lady," said Asher. She turned around to face him and when she faced him, he felt on top of the world for just seeing her beautiful and uplifting smile. "My lady, I don't know if you remember me." "I do. You are Lord Asher of House Forrester," she said. "She remembers me." I am now training for the Kingsguard," he replied as he sat on the bench opposite her. "My congratulations, Sir Asher," she said with a widening smile. "You are most kind, my lady, but I am afraid that I am no knight." "At least, not yet," Asher replied earnestly. "You are not?" "Regretfully no, I don't want to be knighted for something such as a name-a-day gift or just winning a tourney. I want to be knighted because I earned it doing a worthy and knightly deed," he explained. "Oh well. I am sure that you will be knighted for such a thing, Lord Asher. And it will be an honor to see a fellow Northerner in the Kingsguard," she said sweetly. "Thank you, my lady. But I came to personally seek you out." "For what reason?" she asked. "To swear my loyalty to you. I swear that as long as I live, I will always protect you and fight for you," he said fervently. She looked surprised by his declaration of loyalty. "I accept, Lord Asher. And thank you." Tris v. The Golden Company had sailed from Lies for the lands of the long summer. And Tris was aboard Galeneo's personal ship, the Walking Lizard, named for a walking lizard which an ancestor of Vigor Galeneo's had slain when it was newly arrived in a fighting pit of Astapa. "So, what plan do you have for conquering the lands of the long summer, Lord Galeneo's?" asked Tris. One of the reasons why Egon the Conqueror was so successful was because he wrote letters to all kingdoms of Westeros, thereby luring out the kings and their armies into a few, but decisive battles. "I intend to do just the same." "Ah, but Egon the Conqueror had 3 dragons," Tris pointed out. "And though I am a black dragon, I am still just man." "He did, but I have you, the Golden Company, and better, I also know of the best place to fight our battle," he said. "A bold claim," said Tris. "So, where is this place?" asked the captain of the Golden Company. "At the fields of the ruins of Garrosh, a market town. It has a ridge with a perfect view of the both sides of the battlefield. It is right in the center of the lands of the long summer," explained the ambitious warlord. "That is a good plan, but what if they plan to keep their armies stationed at home? Just as the Dornish had done to keep independent of the Iron Throne for over a century," said Tris. "They won't. The rulers of their cities are proud and arrogant fools whom believe in their own power and might. But by luring them all out onto the battlefield and crushing them with a single and decisive victory, we will win this war and I will be king," he said arrogantly. The Lysan thinks very highly of himself and what he is capable of. Though according to Lysano, he is a veteran of 12 years of fighting for the Second Sons. He is at least no stranger to the battlefield. But as long as he leaves the planning of our battles to me and lays us well, then the Golden Company will gladly fight for him." Tris had made a promise to the men of the Golden Company that under his leadership, they would earn riches beyond imagining by placing Valyrian warlords from across the free cities as kings of their own respective kingdoms that we help carve out for them. Now, he had to deliver on this very promise. This campaign to conquer the lands of the long summer and make Vigor Galeneos as its king had to be a success. All captains of the Golden Company before him had won battles and wars to earn the respect of the men of the Golden Company and secure their command. Tris had no intention to be used from his command as Grandfather Demon had been. Not when he still had his own kingdom to claim. And claim it, he would, with fire and blood, just as his great ancestor, Egon the Conqueror, had done. Chapter 24, The Maneless Lion. Chapter text. Sangza 3. Ever since Egon had announced their betrothal to the nobility of the realm, to say that Sangza was overexcited, was an understatement. She was excited, not merely at the prospect of being queen, but more of wedding Egon, whom she felt infatuated with. Since they had first begun to court, Sansa found herself counting down the hours until she would meet Aegon, either around the Red Keep, in the capital itself, or even in the gardens of the Red Keep. And from what she had heard of him from Uncle Ned, Aunt Ashera and Rob's friend, Lucas, she knew that he was an honorable young man and whom did not ever stain his honor by taking whores or mistresses to bed. However, whilst her happiness was undimmed like the light of Maester Lewin's glass candle, she hadn't failed to notice how many southern ladies looked at her disdain and jealousy for being betrothed to Aegon. They even had the audacity to call her a northern savage. But none of that mattered to Sansa, not when she was to wed Aegon. And soon after she drank tea with Princess Rhaenys and Princess Daenerys in the Red Keep's gardens, she was walking to the Godswood to pray. But on her journey there, she noticed a young man, the same age as she, walking towards her. He was tall. He had beautiful golden hair and eyes which were green like wildfire. He was undeniably very handsome, Sansa could see, though he was nearly as handsome as Aegon. She recognized him as Sir Joffrey Lannister, the eldest son of Cersei and Davin Lannister and future Lord of Lannisport, though some said he was also heir to Casterly Rock after his uncle Jaime. "Good day, Lady Sansa. I am Sir Joffrey of House Lannister," he said with a charming smile. "Good day, Sir Joffrey. How might I help you?" Sansa asked patiently and politely, hoping to pray at the Godswood without interruption. "I merely hoped to meet my future queen in person," he said pleasantly. "Oh, well. That makes a nice change to ladies sneering at me and calling me a northern savage," Sansa thought with relief. Sansa smiled as she held out her hand. Sir Joffrey picked her hand. Suddenly, his soft hands tightened around her wrist and he grabbed her by both her hands. "Now listen, northern whore. My sister is to be queen, and you are a stupid bitch. You will never be queen. You will cancel your betrothal now. Or I will have you now," he said with an evil grin as he reached for the top lining of her dress. Sansa was at first too scared to scream in pain. But now she was going to scream for father. "Stay your hand, fucking coward." Sansa felt elated to see Asha running towards them. "Back away. Or I'll have you imprisoned in the black cells for assaulting the king's betrothed." Joffrey stupidly threatened as he released his grip on Sansa's hands and turned to Asha. Before Sansa could tell him that she would never allow Aegon to do that, Joffrey unsheathed a longsword from his belt and pointed it at Asha, as if to prove how dangerous he was. But Asha jumped at him, beating his sword away and punching him hard in the face. He yelped as he fell and landed on his backside. The Lannister coward cried as blood spilled from his lip and mouth and tears fell from his eyes. "Leave now, you little coward of a Lannister, or I will beat you even worse," Asha scarily threatened. He stood and ran from Asha and Sansa as fast as he could. Asha calmed as he turned to Sansa, whom was trembling at what had just happened. "Come, my lady. I will take you to Grand Maester Leo," he said. Sansa nervously followed Asha to the solar of the Grand Maester. Whilst she stayed, Asha left to bring this to the attention of Elia. Interlude V. Jaime Lannister became Westeros king in George R. R. Martin's original Game of Thrones plan, killing Sansa Stark and Joffrey Baratheon's son. Jaime Lannister, Nikolaj Coster-Waldau. Whilst Jaime and father were both furious over what happened, they had managed to contain their anger as best as they could. However, in Cersei's case, her fury was not directed at her idiot son as Jaime and father had directed their anger, but rather at Sansa Stark and her protector, Asha Forrester. Cersei had always been far too soft with her children, but Joffrey the most of all, whilst Tommen and Myrcella were not worthy of her consideration. It made Jaime wonder how it was that he could ever have felt for her, especially after everything they once shared. But Jaime was at least glad that the Targaryens wanted this all dealt with quietly. In the King's Solar, Jaime was sat with father, Cersei, Davin and Joffrey on one side of the king's desk. And on the other side, sat beside the future queen were her parents, Brandon Stark and Catelyn Tully. And sat with the king was Elia and Rolla. "Your Grace, I can assure you that my grandson did not act on my orders in the slightest," said father. "He is at least being truthful about this rather than when he met Elia all those years ago. And though they may hate him, they know him well enough that he would never orchestrate something as stupid as this. I believe you, Lord Lannister. And yet, can you possibly imagine just how infuriated I felt at hearing of this assault in my beloved betrothed? Can you?" The king spoke with such powerful authority as well as resolve and grace. He has been well taught by Elia and Rolla, Jaime thought with admiration for the king. Father shook his head just once before turning to his most disappointing family member. Your Grace, I will see to it that my grandson is suitably punished for this transgression to both House Stark and House Targaryen, said Father. Just how will he be punished, Lord Tywine? Demanded Brandon Stark as both he and his wife glared at them. As he glared at Father, Jaime remembered hearing about how Brandon Stark the Avenging Wolf stood against Father after halting the sack of the capital, and how Eddard Stark the heroic wolf did all that Jaime did not in saving the Targaryens from Clegane and Lorne. He had heard from Lyle Crickehall just how furious Elia was at Arthur, Oswell and Lord Commander Hightower for not doing a single thing to protect the royal family in the rebellion. Appropriately, Lord Stark father said as he turned to one of the few men Jaime knew he held any respect for. It was a moment of jealous passion, Lord Stark, Your Grace. My son was simply jealous that the Lady Sansa was chosen over my daughter, Cersei said stupidly. Gods, why do you even open your stupid mouth? How is it that people thought you were the clever one out of the two of us? As he expected, the king was far from impressed. The Starks still darkly glared at her and Joffrey, whilst Jaime's vicious idiot of a nephew looked up with hope at his mother's stupid statement. Your son assaulted his future queen. He threatened to harm her, and he even threatened to force himself upon her. Rolla snapped. After everything that she had endured at the hands of Aerys, Jaime admired her resolve in how she furiously confronted Father and Cersei. And at that, Joffrey fell to his knees and wept as he begged for mercy and offered pathetic apologies to Sansa and to the king. The king glared furiously at him, whilst Brandon Stark looked as though he wanted nothing more than to behead him as he had witnessed him do to Aerys. Lady Cersei, after all that my soon-to-be wife suffered, how can I possibly show mercy? Especially when Lord Stark wants nothing more than to behead him. Cersei was scared at what this meant, and Joffrey's wails grew louder in the king's solar, to the irritation of everyone else, barring Cersei. Sir Arthur, take him to a black cell. Following Rolla's orders, Jaime's former sworn brother Arthur angrily grabbed Joffrey, and as he kicked and screamed, he was taken away whilst Oswell closed the door. As I said, I wanted this dealt with quietly, said the king. And it was then that Elia spoke. These are House Targaryen's terms. Joffrey will spend the night in a black cell and then be sailed on a one-way voyage to Eastwatch by the sea. Sir Jaime shall be wed to Lady Margaery of House Tyrell. And for the next 5 years, House Lannister shall pay House Stark an increased price for use of the Cailin Canal, said Elia. Me marry. For years, ever since Jaime was discharged from the Kingsguard, Jaime held no desire to marry and wanted to be a bachelor, like his childhood hero, Brynden the Blackfish. Simply because of what Father had done to Tyrion and Tasha and what Aerys had done to Rolla. Though he had only told that to Tyrion, never to Father, whom would only berate him for not doing his duty as a Lannister. You cannot take my son away from me. Cersei screamed as though she held any authority or power. She turned to Father expectant like a spoiled little girl, as though expecting him to slither them out of this predicament. Elia merely raised a brow at this interruption. This is of course your choice, Lord Lannister. But the alternative is a public trial for Joffrey, doubly increased taxes for the Westerlands, being banned from any feasts or tourneys held in the capital, blocking any trade with the rest of Westeros, and outlawing any future marriages between House Targaryen and House Lannister, said the king. That's no choice at all. We accept, Your Grace, Father said without hesitation. Cersei looked betrayed at Father for agreeing to this. Good, said the king. Chapter 25, Honor, Not Honors. Chapter Text. Interlude 6. Reynold Westerling, Santiago Cabrera, Thespian. Reynold sat with Father and Mother in what they had decided was their favorite spot in the Red Keep. It was a spot in the Red Keep gardens where the Targaryens would often dine, drink tea or socialize with friends. Reynold liked it for the view of Blackwater Bay and the narrow sea. Father had always enjoyed looking out at sea, he had always told him growing up. However, this was no social gathering they had come for. No, they had gathered there because of an unexpected proposition. Long had Father been trying to secure a bride for Reynold and a groom for Jane. But never had they ever expected a suitor to be interested in Reynold's eldest sister, such as the one whom had come with both his parents. Jane was sat in the corner whilst Reynold was sat with Mother and Father. Mother, he knew for certain, was very against the match. She had long wanted to try and make a match between Jane and Joffrey Lannister. A boy whom Reynold had long hated for how he would publicly mock and insult knights whom had been unhorsed in a joust. And on the very rare occasion that he did joust, he would only win when someone fearfully did not want to anger the old lion, his grandfather. He would relentlessly mock both he and his family. But on every time that Reynold had unhorsed him, he would furiously threaten to do to you worthless Westerlings what grandfather did to the Rains of Castamaria. Reynold had only met Robb a few times. The first he had met him was in Riverrun when he had gone there for a tourney to celebrate the birth of Edmure Tully's daughter Jar Jarina. Reynold and Robb had jousted against each other 5 times before finally Reynold had unhorsed the heir to Winterfell. But the two had struck up a friendship during his wardship in Riverrun. And it was on their reunion in King's Landing, that Reynold had introduced him to his sister. Jane, still a shy and innocent girl, was instantly enamored with him, Reynold saw when she was joyfully speaking of him after their first courting. "Lord and Lady Westerling, both Lord Stark and I thank you for taking the time to meet," said Lady Stark. "Of course, Lady Stark. It is an honor to meet you both, and in such pleasant circumstances," father said with an eager smile. But mother, as always, was scowling that this was even taking place. "Mother, just stop it. This is the best match House Westerling has ever made in recent history. We have very little chance of a successful match with any of the Lannisters. They have all looked down on us ever since father wed you. Though he had no choice, if the stories are to be believed. Pleasant circumstances indeed. Now, we all are aware of my son's intentions with the lovely Jane. But, from such a match with House Westerling, what is it that House Westerling wants from House Stark?" asked the famed avenging wolf whom avenged his father on the walls of the capital. Reynold turned to father, whom clapped his hands together. He just hoped that mother hadn't convinced him to be too greedy. For he didn't want to crush Jane's happiness nor the only chance for House Westerling to arise from the state of mire they were in. "I make it no secret that a discounted use of the Cailin Canal would be a consideration for House Westerling. As well as trading rights with the North," said father. Lord Stark rolled his eyes lightly at father's mention of the Cailin Canal. "That will be held under consideration, Lord Westerling. But here is what we would offer, for House Westerling to act as an arbiter between the North and the Westerlands." "An arbiter? In what way?" asked father, intrigued. "Yes. In what way? Well, ever since the Cailin Canal was finished, the North has been swarming with merchants from across the known world. It is said that one cannot stretch their legs without accidentally kicking a foreign merchant's exotic goods in White Harbor. If House Westerling were to become a public ally of House Stark, the crag would be swarming with merchants looking to sell their goods across the Westerlands," said Lady Stark. "I may not know much about economics or how to provide for the crag and its subjects, but even I know that such a deal as this would be of incredible benefit to us." Reynold knew well of House Westerling's economic status ever since all mines in Westerling lands had been dried, coincidentally ever since father had wed mother, forcing father to sell Westerling lands. What coin they did have, they had gained from Reynold's tourney victories across the 7 kingdoms, which also benefited the dowries for Jane and Elinor. Father's eyes lit up at the mention of this. "And you could guarantee this, Lady Stark?" asked father. "We can, Lord Westerling." Reynold turned to father. He smiled as he glanced at Jane, whom was spending the whole time smiling at Robb. Mother, meanwhile, was stubbornly not seeing the benefit of this. She was reaching for father's hand and trying to whisper in his ear. Reynold, whom was sitting next to her, grabbed her hand swiftly and whispered in her ear. "Whatever you are thinking, mother, don't even try it. That is very generous, Lady Stark. Now, as for the dowry, we are prepared to offer a dowry of 20,000 gold dragons," said father. "I think that is reasonable enough," the Lord of Winterfell remarked with a nod. Lady Stark agreed with a nod. Father beamed at this, seeing as it was neither too little nor too expensive for House Westerling's dwindling treasury. "Well then, I see no reason as to why our houses cannot be joined together in matrimony." Father beamed at Jane and then smiled as he nodded to Robb. "I don't think I have ever seen Jane as happy as she is now," Reynold thought when he saw his sister. She was beaming with joyful elation as the Starks left and she briefly held Robb's hands before he kissed them and whispered to her. "Thank you, father. Thank you so much," she said excitedly as she ran to him and hugged him. Oh, my dear, nothing is as precious as seeing my beautiful daughter so overjoyed, father said before kissing her forehead. In spite of the fact that you are wedding her to a northern savage. Reynold frowned as he rolled his eyes at mother whilst Jane's wonderful smile into a melancholy frown. Ignore mother, Jane. Just think of wedding him and one day being Lady Stark, said Reynold, at which Jane's smile returned and she left, presumably to tell Elinor all about it. A northern savage. Sybil, I think you are forgetting that the North is far from what it was when you were a girl. The North is now just as powerful and as wealthy as the Westerlands and the Reach, wisely said father. And let us not forget that the king is soon to wed Sansa Stark, the sister of Jane's now betrothed, Reynold pointed out. Father nodded at that. Indeed. A connection that not even the Lannisters can boast of, said father. But Tywin Lannister may be furious at us for this, said mother. He won't. He shall be more focused on making powerful alliances through his granddaughter Myrcella now that she will not wed the king, replied Reynold. But father, how will we turn the crag into a place where merchants travelling through the Kalin Canal can ply their trades and sell their goods? Reynold wondered. You forget that we have a few fishing villages at the coast, Reynold, dear boy. We can turn them into a port. If we use what coin we have to build trading ships, we can sell foreign goods across the Westerlands and the Reach. That should provide for our economy. We may have been bankrupt for a long time, but this will change for everything for House Westerling. We might finally regain our position of power through this. And it is all thanks to you and to your sister, Reynold said father. And no thanks to you, mother, Reynold thought as he saw how she scowled. Rob 4. 3 days after the Lannisters, Greyjoys, Tyrells, Arryns and Baratheons had left the capital, the Starks were now leaving. Rob still found it strange that Sansa was soon to be queen. He hugged Sansa as they said their farewells in the entrance of the Red Keep. Gods, sister, we will all miss you, said Rob. And I will miss you, Rob. But promise me that you will soon visit after you are wed, she said. Of course, I will, said Rob with a beaming smile. Rob nodded when he saw Asha. He will protect her, of that, I am certain. Rob hugged Sansa one last time before Alaric, Bern and Rickon all hugged Sansa. Mother and father kissed and hugged Sansa goodbye before King Aegon stood by her side and held her hand. Though he was happy for her, he was sad that she couldn't come for his own wedding. She cannot come for my wedding, but Jane and I might be able to come for hers, Rob reminded himself as he climbed onto his horse, whilst excitedly thinking of how Jane's father accepted his proposal. Rob had come to King's Landing unsure of what to think of the Targaryens, when father had spoken highly of Rolla and Elia, as had Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera in their stories. But Rob had grown up with a dislike for them because of the terrible fates which had befallen grandfather Rickard and Aunt Lyanna. But now, Sansa soon to marry the king, he had gotten the chance to meet Aegon in person and was glad to see that he was indeed a good man. As were his sister, the Princess Rhaenys, the Prince Viserys and Princess Daenerys, and all were good company unlike all he had led himself to believe. But in spite of not caring for the Game of Thrones, Rob saw what the Targaryens were doing, more specifically Elia and Rolla. By Aegon wedding Sansa, that tied the alliance of the North, the Riverlands and the Vale to the Iron Throne. Princess Daenerys was already betrothed to Fortis Baratheon, the heir to Storm's End. Princess Rhaenys was rumoured to soon be betrothed to either Jaime Lannister or Willas Tyrell. And as for Viserys, he had been publicly made Lord of Summerhall, founding House Visarion and casting aside all claims to the Iron Throne. Not even a moon on the Iron Throne, and he's doing all he can to secure his hold on the Iron Throne, Rob thought with admiration for his future good brother. Chapter 26, The New Way, Not the Old. Chapter text. Theon v. This is it. This is all that Uncle Roderick and I have been working towards. I may have convinced Asha and Mother, but now, this is my truest test, as to whether I am capable of leading the Iron Islands. Theon was nervous as he was dressed in his favorite outfit. One with a black overcoat and a golden-colored shirt, emphasizing the colors of House Greyjoy. He looked down at Unrelenting, sheathed in his belt as always, and with a newly decorated hilt of iron and shaped like a kraken and the crossguard shaped like a kraken's tentacles wrapped around a ship's mast. Theon gripped the handle of Unrelenting for luck, as he had begun to do ever since he had first taken it when he slew Oren Waters at Grey Gallows. Luck. Bring me luck, he willed as a knock on the door turned his attention away. He asked nervously. My lord. They are gathering, said Helya. I'm just finished, he replied before leaving his chambers. Theon left his chambers, and with Helya walked to the great hall of Pike, and already at the high table were Mother, Asher and Maester Wendomer. And soon all nobility and captains of the Iron Islands arrived in the great hall, with servants passing around platters of food and trays of drinks. This is it, Theon thought before he spotted Uncle Roderick. Uncle Roderick beamed proudly at him. Theon nodded back at him and rose from the sea-stone chair, and he proceeded to bang his tankard on the table. The great hall turned quiet as all turned to Theon. All knew him already to be a proven and hardened captain, and whom had already won a Valyrian steel sword with the iron price, just as Dalton Greyjoy had. Comrades, captains, lords of the Iron Islands, it is good to welcome you all to Pike and see the best seafarers of the world all together. At that, there was cheers and banging of the tankards on the tables. But as we are gathered here, I am reminded of the last time all captains of the Iron Islands were here. It was over the years ago, and my father, Balon, promised that we would take up arms and make a new kingdom, forged from salt and sea and paid for with blood and the iron price. There were many an I heard in the great hall, but equally, a lack of enthusiasm, especially from the Harlaws and the Black Tides. But there was also careful studying looks at him, as though wondering what he would say next. But then came the clash of the Crickens, a war in which Ironborn killed Ironborn. Is this the path that we must forge for our descendants? To be remembered as quarreling cunts whom murder our own kin and fellow Iron Islanders? No, was shouted by many, especially the Harlaws and the Black Tides. That is why the time has come for us to continue what my grandfather Quavian had started, he said. He paused and let that sink in for his bannerman. This is not something I do lightly, but it is the most realistic course of action. For the mainlanders are all united under King Aegon. And in the north, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, and in Dorne, they are building war fleets and merchant fleets. Never a match for the Great Iron Fleet, it is true, but united, they would have over 1,000 warships and over 300,000 fighting men. We won wars in the past and conquered lands from the weak and divided mainlanders, but not anymore. He paused again, for all gathered to understand the futility of war with Westeros and continued reaving and pillaging. That is why we must move on from the past and become stronger, not from times of war, but from times of peace, he announced. At the conclusion of his speech, Baelor Blacktide spoke up. Baelor Blacktide is just another powerful ally in the making. He too sees the sense in changing from the old way, he remembered Uncle Roderick tell him once. What do you propose, Lord Greyjoy? Theon inhaled and exhaled briefly. That we move on from the old way and turn our way of life from a warring culture to that of a peaceful one in which we can use our seafaring traditions peacefully. As that sunk in, Theon continued. And I would end the taking of salt wives and thralls and the paying of the iron price. I would also seek to create greater ties with the mainland, for our strength and their gold to better improve our lands. And to use our many ships for more than just raiding, but trading. And that was when the shouts arose from the great hall, with many calling him coward and traitor. Theon raised a brow as he faced where the shouts were coming from. Mostly from the Cods, Vomarks and the Wynchs. Whom calls me coward? Whom names me traitor? Come and face me, or all here will call you coward. Theon bellowed. The first to stand was left-handed Lucas Cod, and he was followed by others such as Andric the Unsmiling. Andric was reckoned to be the best fighter of the Ironborn ever since Dagmar Cleftjor was slain by the Crow's Eye, but had taken down over 30 of his men before the Crow's Eye had backstabbed him. You're no fucking Ironborn. Your time with the Reader has made you more craven and like some green and lickspittle mainlander than Ironborn, snorted Lucas Cod. Ergon, shut your son up before he finds himself without a head, Uncle Roderick snapped at the Lord of Coral Outlook. Though all hate the Cods, they are not the only house speaking against me. Come over here and say that again, ass-face. Asher bellowed from her seat and glaring at stupid son of Ergon Cod. You are a traitor to the Ironborn, muttered Andric the Unsmiling. Though quietly spoken, the common-born warrior of House Drum had a long-standing reputation throughout the Iron Islands as a great mountain of a warrior, similar in strength, build and skill to Sandor Clegane, Great Yon Umber, Lyle Crickehall and Drold Hightower. If I back down, I will never have the respect and support of my bannermen. Surely the drowned god didn't bring me this far simply to end like this. I challenge you. What? The challenge from the unsmiling captain in service to Hausdrum brought an eerie silence to the great hall. Theon inhaled and exhaled as he nodded. I accept. Tomorrow, unsmiling, we fight on the beaches and let the drowned god decide the victor. Interlude 7, The White Queen, Janet McTeer as Jacketta Woodville, Lady Rivers, Elizabeth Woodville's mother. Alanis Greyjoy, Janet McTeer. Theon, you must not fight him. Alanis pleaded as Theon put on his chainmail and leathers. If I back down, I will be a craven and might as well go and run back to the Red Keep with my tail between my legs, mother said Theon. And if you fight him, you will die, Alanis said with tear-filled eyes. I have already lost Balon, Roderick and Maron. I cannot lose you too. You and Asher are all that I have left. Mother, I need to fight him. If I don't, I could never call myself a Greyjoy or an Iron Islander, said Theon. Theon was passed unrelenting by Asher, whom proudly smiled at him as she clapped him on his shoulder. They walked on to the beach, where already waiting were the assembled nobility of the Iron Islands, including the proclaimed champion of the Old Way, Andric the Unsmiling. Many were cheering for him as Theon stepped on the wet sands of the beach. A priest of the drowned god stood before them, Maegor's babe. He held up a handful of salt before dropping it on the sands between them. Let the drowned god decide the victor. Theon Greyjoy or Andric the Unsmiling, he announced. Before taking up his sword, Theon reached down for the water and rubbed his wet hands over his face and thoroughly wet his hands before unsheathing his sword and holding it above his shield as he faced the Unsmiling. Begin, shouted Maegor. Alanis held hands with Asher and with Roderick as the Unsmiling smashed his enormous axe across at Theon. Theon blocked the swing with his sword. The next came at his head, and Theon blocked it again, only for the giant to push the sword down with his axe and swung his shield across. The shield bashed into Theon's helmeted face. Many cheered as Theon's helm fell far from his face and blood spilled from his mouth. But he stood tall again to face the champion of Hausdrum. He swung both axe and shield, only for Theon to slice across at him. The blow cut his chest from one side to the other, Valyrian steel breaking leather, chainmail and flesh. Alanis felt elation as she saw the red blood flow from the armor of the giant, whilst Asher led the cheers from them. But he made no sound as he swung his massive axe at Theon. Theon blocked it with his sword and shield. Then the giant kicked him to the ground. Theon fell and Alanis began to cry and felt it hard to breathe as she tightened her grip on the hands of her daughter and her brother. Andric walked towards Theon and raised his axe up high to chop down on him. Theon gasped as he dodged out of the axe's way. He stood up just as the axe crashed onto the sands and Theon swung his shield across at his opponent's face. The blow knocked his helm off. The giant spat out blood and teeth as Theon stood ready to face him. Alanis beamed at Theon's bravery whilst Asher and Roderick cheered Theon on. She panted with fear and adrenaline, but also with hope for her son and his chance for victory. Theon panted as the giant walked towards him, grunting as he angrily swung his axe at Theon. Theon blocked the blow with his shield, only for another blow to break his shield and knock it from his grasp. Theon yelled as he sliced unrelenting at his belly, just above his previous wound. He proceeded to punch him where he had just cut him and then at the other wound. Andric the Unsmiling growled and raged with pain as he panted and took a knee, and for the first time, he showed pain and exhaustion as he faced Theon. Andric's supporters looked concerned as they saw him take a knee and pant for breath and relief. Theon held unrelenting up with both hands as Andric stood back up, throwing his shield away as he glared at Theon with unbridled ferocity. He roared as he swung his axe at Theon's head. Theon dodged the blow from his axe, but he didn't block the blow from the giant's fist. Theon groaned as he fell back a few steps. The giant roared as he swung around on his feet and smashed his axe down. Theon dodged the blow, but Alanis yelped with fear when she saw his axe hit Theon's breastplate. Theon fell back a few steps. But his breastplate was only cracked and no blood spilled from it, which the giant's supporters realized when they stopped cheering. He swung his axe across at Theon, panting as he did so. Theon blocked it with unrelenting, but the hook of the axe hooked onto the blade. The giant pulled Theon towards him and Theon used this as a chance to punch him the last time where he wounded him the first time. The giant broke from the clash in pain before Theon sliced unrelenting on his kneecap. The giant fell to his knees before Theon roared as he sliced unrelenting at his neck. Alanis gasped as the giant's head fell from his neck and onto the sands, followed by the rest of his body. Asher, Rodrik, the Harlaws, Black Tides and Theon's few supporters cheered for him as he turned to face the onlookers, blooded and exhausted, but in a rage. All of those whom supported Andrik the Unsmiling stared in shock at the death of their champion. Asher and Rodrik clapped and cheered proudly for Theon before Theon furiously pointed at those whom had spoken against him. "Does anyone else wish to challenge me? Any other man whom wishes to test his iron with me? Or have your balls all dropped?" he shouted as he panted with pain and exhaustion, his face covered in sweat and blood. None dared to speak up. Theon's frightening gaze fell on one in particular. "Not even you, Cod." Lucas Cod was sweating so much that he looked like a man wearing furs in a Dornish summer. My lord, I misspoke. It was the drink." "Craven, are you? Come here and fight me." Theon snapped. The heir to Coral Outlook looked as though his bowel had just relieved itself. Asher was only too pleased to grab left-handed Lucas and push him towards her brother. He fearfully drew an axe and picked up the half-broken shield of Andrik the Unsmiling. He poorly tried to defend himself from Theon, but Theon's attacks were too fast and too strong for him until Theon stabbed him in the groin. He screamed as he fell to his knees and reached for his groin with both his hands before Theon sliced his throat, at which Asher burst out laughing. "Does anyone else seek to return to the old way?" Theon demanded. None dared to speak up, for the only sounds to be heard were the cold sea wind, the pained pants of Theon and the still amused laughs of Asher at the killing of Lucas Cod. "We follow the new way and that is absolute." Chapter 27, Only a Dragon of a Different Coat. Chapter text. Tris 6. In the invasion of the lands of the Long Summer, the campaign had begun just as Galeneos had planned, by sending letters to the Archons of Valyria, Mantris, Tollus, Porosh and Oros. They responded by putting aside all differences and united all their armies under the banner of the most powerful of them, Taliga Malrios, Archon of Mantris. He commanded an army of 40,000 men, facing Galeneos and his army of 10,000 rebels and sellswords and 12,000 men of the Golden Company. Tris planned with Galeneos in his tent on the outskirts of Venus Manse, the ruined palace of Aena Targaryen before he fled the lands of the Long Summer for Westeros in the aftermath of the fall of Valyria. Aena's Manse was situated near the Demon Road and a few miles away from the Painted Mountains. "We position our elephants to our front and have only our light cavalry covering our flanks, whilst our heavy cavalry prepares to attack both their flanks on the signal," said Tris as he moved pieces on the map. "And the infantry?" asked Galeneos. "Behind the elephants. They move at a slow pace and just as the Illyrians send their famous slingers, our elephants charge." "And once the infantry positions are broken?" asked Galeneos. "The light cavalry hit them in their front and desk with their cavalry. And just as all their armies face ours, our heavy cavalry shall smash into them and win the battle for us." Galeneos merely looked up at him as he finished. "Brilliant," he said. Tris explained the plan to the officers of the Golden Company and the next morning, he rode with the light cavalry at the army's front. On Tris' command, Laswell Peak commanded the elephants and at the blow of the Golden Company captain's war horn, simply known as the Golden Horn, the elephants trotted towards the allied armies. And Galeneos was leading the infantry on horseback, led a slowed march towards the enemy. Just as Tris had predicted, they sent their archers and famed slingers to face them first. But before they could fire on elephants of the Golden Company, theirs was the march which sent various earth tremors around the expansive deserts, a few fields situated next to the river. "March!" Galeneos commanded. The infantry began to march behind him as they headed towards the enemy army. Tris felt reassured when he saw one of the Cole brothers have a banner a distance away. "Franklin and the cavalry are in position," he reasoned with a grin as he led the light cavalry at a steady pace. And as the elephants charged towards the straight line of the allied army, Galeneos gave the order. "Charge! At them!" Tris ordered as he unsheathed Blackfyr and charged with his light cavalry. The charge of the infantry had broken through the first few lines of the enemy army. And it was as the light cavalry broke through even further, striking at their flanks. Tris sliced Blackfyr down, cutting many men down as he rode through their lines. One day soon it will be the Knights of Westeros. He grinned as he saw the enemy banners were only a stone's throw away. Trys stabbed another man before he drew his personal war horn and blew hard on it. He tucked it back in his belt and sliced at more soldiers charging at him until he was joined by more of his own men. Then came from the rising desert dust from the heavy cavalry and knights of the Golden Company, led by Franklin. As he planned, their charge into the enemy army was like a hot knife through butter. I have my victory, was all Trys could think of. First these lands, but soon, Westeros. Elia 8. It had taken a long and grueling meeting with the infamous Queen of Thorns and her oafish son Mace Tyrell before they would agree with the plans Elia and Rolla had made for Westeros with the Reach and House Tyrell in mind. Elia was intent for there to contentment and peace in Aegon's realm in the first few years of his reign and for there to be little to no trouble. When she had first wed Rhaegar and become Princess of Dragonstone, she had sworn to herself to follow Rolla's example by being good to all small folk of King's Landing. And because of her efforts, in the rebellion's aftermath and Rhaegar was announced to be exiled into the Night's Watch, there was no resistance against Elia ruling as regent for Aegon. But Elia knew that houses such as the Tyrells would want to feed their greed for power and influence in exchange for their loyalty and support. And in this case, Mace Tyrell was permitted to award the castle of Whitegrove to his second son Garlan and the castle of Dunstanbury to his cousin Theodore, creating the houses of Gartrell and Thyrell respectively. Jaime was to wed Margaery Tyrell. And Rhaenys was to wed Willers Tyrell. Gods, does the greed of the Tyrells know any end? Elia found herself wondering as she signed the necessary documentation in her solar. But in her moves of creating new noble houses across the realm, she had also decided to increase House Tully's loyalty by awarding Edmure Tully the ruins of Old Stones and royal consent to restore the seat of the ancient and fallen House Mud and to one day award it to his second son, Benjicot. When she saw Sansa entering her solar, Elia beamed at her as she out her quill aside. She stretched her tired wrist around, sore from overuse in writing letters and signing documents already written by the Grand Maester. At least her parents were not as greedy as the Lannisters, Tullys or Tyrells, she thought as she remembered the negotiations between she and Brandon. Sansa, hello, my dear, she said sweetly. Hello, Elia, she replied with a smile as she sat down beside her. She had begun to call her Elia at her own insistence as opposed to Your Grace when she and Aegon had first begun to court, and Elia had seen how she had made her son beam. How are you? She asked. It is strange. Though the Red Keep is beautiful and magnificent, and all here are so kind and polite, I cannot help but feel a longing for home, she admitted. Elia beamed at her as she held her hand. Come and walk with me, my dear, she said. Sansa stood up and they left her solar together. It will always be difficult. I know this for certain, for when I first came here, I found myself longing for Sunspear and for my brothers and my family, she explained. But how did you learn to cope? Sansa asked. With small bricks, you lay a foundation, but as you complete the substructure, you continue until you build a great work worthy of a mention in Lomas Longstrider's book. First, I toured around the capital with my former husband and my good mother. And I had my ladies-in-waiting, whom I could always rely on and trust that they were my friends and would help me and advise me, including your Aunt Ashera. Just find ways to be beside Aegon, let him know that you are there for him and that you will help him through all trials and adversity. Come on tours around the city with Rolla, Aegon and I, and let the people see their future queen. And soon, start looking at ladies-in-waiting. Don't choose ladies from great families. Choose those whom you already count as friends and those whom you are certain will be at your side. Aegon 4. My first session of the Small Council as king, Aegon thought as he walked to the chambers of the Small Council, escorted by Sir Lyle. Aegon had previously attended sessions in the past few years, under Mother's guidance and to gain a better understanding of ruling. But ultimately, Mother gave the commands of important matters and not he. Mother still attended them with him, but as an advisor. Aegon looked at all in the Small Council in attendance. Grand Maester Leo Tyrell. Varys, the Master of Whispers. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower. Montford Valerian, Master of Ships. Baelor Hightower, Master of Coin. Horton Redfort, Master of Laws. And John Connington, Hand of the King. My lords, what matters are there across the realm so soon after my coronation? Aegon asked. Your Grace, there is a calmness across the realm with your coronation and your betrothal to the fair Lady Sansa, said Lord Royce. And what of the royal treasury, Sir Baylor? Asked Aegon. Your Grace, presently there is 5 million gold dragons in the royal treasury, per your request to not overspend on the coronation, said the heir to Old Town. This is more than enough to foot the necessary costs for the royal wedding, Your Grace, said John Connington. Very well, but I want this clear, I do not want an unnecessarily extravagant wedding, with a banquet large enough to feed the entire populace of Dragonstone, nor decorations engraved with gold and gemstones. I care not for a wedding for the small folk to speak of for years to come. I care only for a wedding to let the realm know that there will always be peace and stability. Mother beamed proudly at him for this, whilst all the small council agreed to it. And I understand that Theon Greyjoy has begun reforms in the Iron Islands. Mother asked. He has, Your Grace. Though, at first, he faced opposition, including from a great warrior called Andric the Unsmiling, thought to be the greatest fighter in the Iron Islands. In a great duel on the beaches of Pike, Theon Greyjoy bested his opponent and has now begun his reforms in earnest, said Varys. Very impressive. Far contrast to the likes of his father or all great Ironborn pirates and reavers before him, Aegon thought. Your Grace, forgive me, but how can we trust the Iron Islanders? They are little more than a nation of reavers and pirates whom call a few barren islands home, said Horton Redfort. True, however, when Lord Greyjoy came to the capital, he had personally expressed his desire to reform his people and end their piratical ways of life, said Aegon. And Lord Redfort, I highly doubt that he would have slain the greatest warrior of the Ironborn if he was not sincere in his desire to reform, Mother said wisely. And what has Theon Greyjoy done now? Asked Lord Valerian. He has built a war fleet of 40 ships and sold them to Sunspear, and he has been exchanging ravens with Prince Doran on dealing with the pirates of the Stepstones for good, replied Varys. Excellent. And with the pirates of the Stepstones wiped out for good, and then the Sisterman raiders and Tiroshi slavers, there will be peace in my reign. Theon Greyjoy's eagerness to change the Iron Islands may very well be the very best thing to happen in my reign. But my king, there is something important I must mention, said Varys. Regarding what? Asked Jon. Regarding the security of the realm. For the Golden Company has left lies, said Varys. The last I had heard of them, their commander was Harry Strickland. But why does he mention them? Is this a concern to us, Lord Varys? Asked Mother. Not for the moment, Your Grace. They leave for the lands of the Long Summer and serve a Lysan Valyrian warlord called Vigor Galenios, whom wishes to conquer the city-states of these lands and become its king, said Varys. Ever since Aegon Regaria failed to conquer the Summer Isles, it has become an age of Valyrian warlords trying to conquer their own kingdoms, Aegon thought. I hardly think this to be an important matter to us, Lord Varys, said Jon. Ah, but I mention this Lord Hand, only because of whom their captain is. Why? Is he dangerous, Lord Varys? Asked Aegon. Yes, Your Grace. He is very dangerous indeed. His name is Tris Blackfyr. Blackfyr. An eerie and shocked silence filled the small council. But, that's impossible, said Montford Valerian. I'm afraid not, Lord Valerian. Harry Strickland was killed in battle against Tioche, and this Blackfyr was elected captain, said Varys. But that traitorous line died out years ago, said the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. All but one, Lord Commander. He is the grandson of Demon Blackfyr, whom had a son before he was murdered by Maelys the Monstrous, said Varys. Do you have proof of this, Lord Varys? Asked the Grand Maester. I do, he said before he produced a document and passed it to Aegon. To First Magister Vaina Brynarsar. The works in the disputed lands have begun in earnest. Salad Horsaran has raided Tiroshi ships, this should set them back for a while. The Golden Company's new captain, Tris Blackfyr, has agreed to remain an ally of Lys whilst he has gone to help the Galenios boy conquer the lands of the Long Summer. Yours faithfully, Magister Malar Orthes. It's true, Aegon said fearfully as he put the parchment down. The Blackfyres are not yet finished. Chapter 28, The Lady of Seashells. Chapter text. Sansa 4. Following Elia's advice, Sansa had agreed to take on ladies-in-waiting. She had written to Jane Poole and Myra Forrester. She had chosen they because they were her dearest friends and shared her interest in the south, whilst her other friends, Beth Castle and Aelys Karstark, preferred life in the north. And both Jane and Myra had eagerly accepted Sansa's offer in their replies to her. She had decided to have 3 more, and not merely from the north, but from the rest of the realm. She had decided on Desmara Redwyne, Myranda Royce and Tira Toland. She had met Myranda Royce and befriended her when she had learned that she was courting cousin Harold. And Tira Toland, she liked, after meeting her during the tourney celebrating the coronation, for they were both cheering on Sir Lucas Blackwood. And as for Desmara Redwyne, she had befriended her when they looked out at the harbour from the gardens and she told her of ships, which she spoke of with expertise as was befitting a Redwyne of the Arbor. And because she was soon to be queen, she remembered all that Elia had told her about when she was crown princess. Sansa had begun to make plans to tour around the capital once she was queen and to do so with both Elia and Rolla. She knew that they had experience as queens and that she would need to learn from them. She knew that she wanted to be a good and beloved queen and be nothing like Rhaenyra Targaryen. She sought to follow the examples made by Elia and Rolla for all the good they had done and all the good they were presently doing. But more than anything, Sansa knew soon after the betrothal was announced, jealous ladies of the Reach and the Westerlands called her a barbaric northern savage. Elia had advised her to let the world see your gentle nature and your goodness but let them hear of your greatness. And from then on, you shall gain their respect. There is a clear dividing line between goodness and greatness. If they see you do good things, they will see what they expect of a queen, but when they hear of your great deeds, that is when you will earn their respect and they will never have the audacity to call you a northern savage to your face. After Sansa had finished writing letters to her friends, both old and new, she left her chambers and walked to Aegon's Solar, where Sir Lyle stood vigilant guard outside. Sansa liked the Strongbow Kingsguard, whom was a cheerful and jolly knight in spite of his brutish and hard appearance and the scars adorning his face and hands, reminding Sansa of the umbers of last hearth. "Good day, Sir Lyle," she said. "Good day, my lady. His Grace will be eager, I'm sure, to see you." Greeting his beloved betrothed is sure to brighten his day far more than reading dull correspondence from the rest of the realm, he said with a grin. Sansa chuckled at his jape, but felt a blush on her cheeks at how he termed her as Aegon's beloved betrothed. He opened the door, and Sansa beamed at Aegon when she saw him. He looked up and beamed at her. "Sansa, do come in," he said. She sat beside him, glancing at the many parchments spread all over his desk. Dull correspondence indeed, she thought. But as she sat beside him and he sat back down, she saw the parchment in his hand and the sad frown on his face. "Is all well?" she asked with worry. "I don't wish to burden you with these things, Sansa," he said with a dismissive gesture. "Aegon, if I am to be your wife, it is my duty to shoulder all burdens alongside you," she said as she reached for his hand and held it. He smiled gratefully at her as he placed the parchment down. "I found out recently that my father had tried to write letters to me ever since I was a boy. But Mother banned him of that right by restricting him of it. I know all that he had done to the realm back then, but he is still my father," he explained. "How did you come upon this?" she asked. "In a letter from my thrice-great-uncle Aemon, whom is Maester at Castle Black. He congratulated me on my coronation, but explained my father's restriction from writing to me or to Rhaenys," he explained. "As much as I should hate him for what became of Grandfather Ricard and Aunt Lyanna, he is still Aegon's father." "Do you hate him?" she asked. "There are times I want to. But the stories told of him by Uncle Viserys, Grandmother Rolla, Sir Arthur, Sir Barristan, Sir Oswell, Sir Gerald and Uncle Lewin, all make me want to try and meet him, or at the very least write to him," he replied. "Then do it. As much as I should hate him for what happened to my family, he is still your father, and undoubtedly wants to know about you and Rhaenys. He may have done many terrible things, but in the last 7 and 10 years, he has served the realm in permanent exile at the Wall, and my uncle Benjen counts him as a friend and a sworn brother in spite of what happened. Give him the chance to know you, and perhaps one day, if we should visit Winterfell in a royal procession, we can also visit Castle Black," Sansa offered. Aegon looked surprised at what she said. "You would do that?" "For you, yes. He is still your father, and from what is said about him, he may have been guided by obsession with prophecies, but he still loved your mother, your sister and you. After all his years in exile, I think that he deserves a chance to be heard," she replied. Interlude 8, pin page. Jane Westerling, Courtney Eaton. Jane was sat in the chambers she shared with Elinor, inwardly preparing herself for what mother and father had excitedly been preparing for ever since Lord and Lady Stark had met with them whilst she and Robb were still courting in King's Landing. A marriage match for her was being planned before the coronation, where father was thinking to wed her to Joffrey Lannister, second in line to Casterly Rock. But all that changed when Sansa Stark was betrothed to the king. Joffrey Lannister was sent to the Night's Watch, and when she met Robb. It had been an entire century ever since a lady of House Westerling had been Lady of Casterly Rock, and not since Maegor the Cruel when a Westerling lady had been wed to the eponymous king. But now a marriage with House Stark had been not only desired by the northern houses, but by the most powerful houses of the Seven Kingdoms, because of the construction of the Cailin Canal and the power and wealth of the north becoming greater than ever before. But Jane cared little for things such as these. What she did care about was Robb and being wed to him. She had never thought to have fallen in love with him when she had first met him in the capital, but there he was. The handsome heir to Winterfell. Robb Stark was a very handsome man, and the stories of him described him as a very skilled warrior and a diligent Stark. Her eldest brother, Reynold, said as much from his travels of jousting in tourneys from the Reach to the Riverlands. "How are you, big sister?" asked Elinor. "I just can't stop thinking about him and about today," she admitted. "This must be the greatest day of my life. If this is a dream, I don't ever want to wake up." "I think that you are nervous and what you need is a hug," she said with an innocent smile. "Don't you dare," Jane said as she pointed a finger at her, at which Elinor laughed. A knock on the door prevented them from letting this go any further. "Dears, might we come in?" Mother asked. "Yes, come in," Mother replied Jane. Mother and Father entered their chambers, and Father beamed at seeing Jane in her dress. "Oh, Jane, you look so beautiful," Mother said before hugging her. "Thank you," Mother said Jane with a slight smile. Whilst Father, Reynold and Roland were all proud for her, Mother was still thinking that she could do better than Robb. "Come. Let's not be too late," said Father. Father took a beautiful seashell necklace out of a small jewelry box. "I had this made in preparation for the wedding. The seashells are decorated with gemstones," he said before putting it on Jane. It was beautiful, she couldn't deny. "Thank you so much," Father said Jane before hugging him. Jane held Father's hand and they left the first keep together and walked to the Godswood, where all the nobility of the north had come for her wedding and a few families of the Westerlands had come. She saw Uncle Rolf stood with Mother, Reynold, Roland and Elinor at the front. She and Father walked down the aisle and saw Lord Stark stood by Robb. "Who comes before the old gods this day?" asked Lord Stark. "Jane of House Westerling, a woman grown, true-born and noble. She comes to seek the blessings of the old gods." "Who comes to claim her?" asked Father. "Robb of House Stark." "Who gives her?" asked Robb. "Goran of House Westerling, Lord of the Crag, her father." "Jane Westerling, do you take this man?" asked Lord Stark. "I take this man," said Jane. She walked beside Robb and held his hands. "You may now cloak the bride under your protection," said Lord Stark. Robb unfastened her Westerling embroidered cloak as Jane stood on her tiptoes, due to the height difference between them. Robb placed a bridal white cloak over her. As they stood straight and faced each other, they held each other's hands. "I am hers and she is mine." "I am his and he is mine," said Jane. The two kissed each other on the lips before turning to the gathered family, friends and nobility of the north, whom clapped and cheered as the two walked down the aisle holding hands and back inside the great keep. "Gods, I love him so much," Jane thought as she wanted to remain rooted there, still kissing him. Lucas 4. When Lucas was training with Sir Barristan in the training yard of the White Sword Tower, he could see just how troubled he was from how he looked as they sparred. 2 nights before, Lord Commander Hightower had informed his sworn brothers and their 2 new recruits of very troubling news. The Blackfyr line was not extinguished, for the Golden Company was being led by another Blackfyr, Triss. "Sir Barristan, if you prefer, we can resume this at another time," Lucas offered. He smiled gratefully as he nodded and said his thanks. Lucas turned away to see Asher defeat both Sir Alisa and Sir Oswell in a duel with his sword and his axe. "You make it look like an art," Lucas commented as the two sat down. "It's how I've fought for years, Bo, since I first killed a man at 12, he replied. "He killed a man when he was 12. When I was that age, I was still unhorsing Brindon in the practice yard and riding with him into Bracken lands and scaring away John O'Bracken's game when he was hunting. Who was he? Lucas asked with curiosity. Bandit trying to steal a wagon of ironwood. He tried to take me for ransom when I was hunting with father. But I took his dagger from his belt and stabbed him, he explained. What do you think about all of this? Lucas wondered. In this new black fear threat haunting the king's sleep. I will be worried when he has a big army and turns his attention to Westeros. But he does not have one, nor does he have the strength to crush all armies and fleets of Westeros, Asher replied. An optimistic view, my friend, said Lucas. Perhaps. But he wouldn't invade when all of his ancestors have failed in usurping the Iron Throne. If Black Fear does come, it will be at the cost of a great many lives, said Lucas. His own included. And if he tried, he would fall like all of the ones before him. Just think of Maelys the Monstrous. One of the biggest and strongest men in all of the world, and he was slain by Sir Barristan, Asher replied. But, Lucas, what do you think of our soon-to-be queen? Asher wondered. Lucas thought of the Lady Sansa, and the most recent time he had seen her. She was walking with Queen Mother Elia and Sir Luwin, and she beamed as she briefly chatted with maidservants and forgave one with a smile when she accidentally dropped a blanket. I think our future queen is kind, beautiful, and one whom will be a good wife and queen to the king, said Lucas. Your friend, the king, said Asher. Well, the only reason we are such is because of all his jousting opponents letting him win, Loras Tyrell and Reynold Westerling included, said Lucas as the two chuckled. But I am a happy man, Lucas. Happy that our future queen invited my sister to be one of her ladies in waiting. It feels so wonderful to have my sister here in the capital, Asher said. But that does mean another you would protect as well as the king. And being a good brother, you would want to kill any man whom would dare to try and charm your sister, Lucas replied. Kill? No. I'd just bury my axe into his balls, Asher replied with a grin. Chapter 29, Iron and Sun. Chapter text. Theon 6. Theon sailed the Iron Kraken and Asher sailed the Black Wind, together leading the Iron Fleet to Planky Town. Upon arriving with 100 warships, Theon grinned when he saw the Dornish war fleet of 40 warships, all bearing the colors of House Martell, and all were crewed by hundreds of Dornish sailors. And all of those warships were from the Iron Islands. A price which Doran Martell had paid 200,000 gold dragons for. Theon had sent Uncle Roderick half of the coin to get started with preparing to build trading posts in Dorne. As the Iron Kraken docked in the quay, Theon saw Princes Doran and Oberyn and their children. Lord Greyjoy, welcome to the Planky Town, said Prince Doran. My thanks, Prince Doran, said Theon before he shook hands with both Prince Doran and his brother. I see you already have your new war fleet prepared for battle, said Theon. Indeed. My youngest son, Tristan, and my niece, Sarala, have proven useful in choosing good captains and many sailors to crew them all, said Prince Doran. Just as the Black Wind made landfall and Asher had joined them, Prince Doran gestured for the Greyjoys to join he, Prince Oberyn and Doran's alluring heiress, Princess Arianne and her handsome soon-to-be husband, Sir John Dane. Is your army ready for battle? Asked Theon. They are. With my brother in command. We have 3,000 men at arms, all of whom are ready to storm Bloodstone Isle and slaughter the pirates, said the Prince of Dorne. And what of their ships? Asked Asher. That, we leave to the Iron Fleet. They have 80 ships and they are under the command of a pirate king called Viriaros Bahias. They have at least 8,000 pirates, said Prince Doran. And what is to become of their fleet? Asked Theon. Dorne does not have an abundance in ships nor in wood, so any you capture, we will pay. But all loot you find is yours. Theon glanced at Asher. She nodded in agreement. Agreed, Prince Doran, said Theon, and the two shook hands. As they resumed their walk to the Planky Keep, and to their chambers, Theon spoke with Asher. This will be worth all of the trouble. With all the plunder these pirate pricks will have, it will keep the captains and bannermen on side in the near future, said Asher. Aye. And it should convince them that we cannot outfight all of Westeros and plunder and conquer as we see fit, said Theon. They need to see the futility of the old way. They must. The next morning, Theon boarded the Iron Kraken and led the Iron Fleet from a Planky Town and set sail for the Stepstones. For decades, the Stepstones had become a place for all Ironborn captains to test their mettle and take a few pirate vessels ever since Dalton Greyjoy sailed for the first time, and claimed the Sword Nightfall. Theon also had spent time sailing the Iron Kraken into the Stepstones, taking pirate ships and claiming unrelenting from the now dead Oran waters. Theon watched as the Dornish fleet sailed Prince Oberyn and his army to Grey Gallows, and formed there, the back of Bloodstone once the Iron Fleet attacked the pirate ships. Theon picked up a handful of water and covered himself with the water as they sailed to Bloodstone. This has become a habit of Theon's, to douse himself with water and feel the presence of the drowned good. He had done this ever since he was Uncle Roderick's ward, and he has done it more often ever since he slew Andric the Unsmiling. The Iron Kraken and the Black Wind were the first ships to sail through the straits between Bloodstone and Bone Rock. Signal for Asha to take her fleet and hit them on the eastern flank. We hit them on the western flank, Theon ordered his first mate, his young cousin Gavin Harlaw. Aye, Theon, he said as he waved a grey flag at the Black Wind. As Asha led her fleet away, Theon saw dozens of anchored pirate ships, all stationary. Fucking fools. The fucking pricks have no idea we are here, Theon remarked. Do we attack? Gavin asked. Aye. All forward. Let's gut these pirate fucks and show them who rules the waves, Theon said. Theon drew unrelenting as the ship turned and they sailed towards Bloodstone. They sailed towards the pirate ships, but as they came closer, that was when the pirates reacted. That took them longer than I thought it would, Theon thought as Blacktide and Drum began to take pirate ships with only a few pirates aboard each one. Theon spotted what appeared to the largest of the pirate ships. It was a three-master ship, large enough to be crewed by 100 sailors. Prepare to board. Theon shouted. The crew all cheered and roared as they began to bang swords and axes against shields for the fight. When they got to the ship, Theon ran aboard with a plank and beheaded a pirate whom charged at him with an axe. Then he spotted a bearded man with an arrow turned to him. His beard was dyed orange and his clothes looked rich and of the free cities. Bahias, time to die, Pirate King. Theon pushed a pirate out of the way as he ran towards Bahias. The Tiroshi Pirate King sliced his arrow at Theon. He easily blocked it with his shield. As he sliced down on him again, Theon parried the curved blade and disarmed him with a swing of his spike, and then he stabbed him in the heart. Interlude 9, Yara Greyjoy, played by Gemma Whelan on Game of Thrones, official website for the HBO series HBO.com. Asha Greyjoy, Gemma Whelan. Though Asha was still annoyed with what Theon intended for the Iron Islands and for their people, she was still proud of all he accomplished. She, like all other Ironborn, was amazed at how he slew Andric the Unsmiling, and she laughed at how he killed left-handed Lucas Cott, a scum she hated for how he would take girls as young as 10 for salt wives. The Battle of Bloodstone had come at the loss of 50 Ironborn warriors, 100 Dornish sailors and over 5,000 pirates, whilst all pirate survivors were sent to the Night's Watch. But whilst the Dornish took all of the ships for themselves, the Ironborn had taken 100,000 gold dragons, 300,000 silver stags, 20 chests filled with gemstones and 70 chests filled with jewelry. But now that the Ironborn had succeeded in wiping out the pirates of the Stepstones, she was at least glad that Theon was having them fight to earn the respect he was keen to earn from the green and weak mainlanders. They don't need to respect us. They need to fear us, Asha thought as she, Theon and Uncle Roderick met with Prince Doran in the old palace of Sunspear. Lord and Lady Greyjoy. Lord Harlaw. I would like to express my deep gratitude for all you have done to help Dorne against the accursed pirates of the Stepstones. I will be sure to write to my nephew, the king, of all that has transpired. These words resonated greatly with both Theon and with Uncle Roderick, Asha had noticed on them. It has been good to fight alongside the brave men of House Martell and to secure peace in Dorne and the seas with them gone, Prince Doran said Theon as he shook hands with the Prince of Dorne. Indeed. And, as I promised, House Martell shall begin the trading agreements with House Greyjoy, he continued. Whilst Theon and Uncle Roderick left with Prince Doran for his solar, Asha was left standing in the courtroom of the old palace. A fine day, is it not, Lady Asha? Asked Prince Oberyn. His black eyes reminded Asha of a viper's, watchful and eagerly searching for prey to fall into its venomous fangs. The red viper faced her whilst flashing a devious smile which reminded Asha of her nights with Carl and with Tristifer Botley. Aye, if you say so, she replied. What does he want? A fuck or a fight? Ah, but whilst your brother wants to change the Iron Islands and its culture, you wish to keep to the old ways, he said, his grin still there, but his sharp and black eyes aiming straight at hers. Perhaps. But he is my brother and he is the Lord of Pike, she replied. True. And it is good that you are like that and have no similarity to Euron, the crows, I said the Red Viper. That cunt is no kin of mine, Asher replied fervently. Of course not. Forgive me. But, ask yourself this, do you see any good coming from your brother's reforms, asked Prince Oberyn. When we arrived in the Red Keep for your nephew's coronation, we were looked down upon by the lords of Westeros, in spite of all that Theon and Uncle Roderick want to do, she explained. I understand. Even now, the Lannisters still call my sister a Dornish whore and think our king foolish for wanting to wed a Stark girl, whom they call a Northern savage and not a Lannister girl, said the Red Viper. But your brother wouldn't have come this far if he didn't strongly believe in what he is doing. He wants to change the Iron Islands for the better and end the raiding and reaving, which does no good in the end. And why is that? Asher asked. Well, the drowned god wants you to raid, reave and conquer all, does he not? Well, what happens when the Ironborn have nothing left to conquer? Another clash of the Kraakens, where Ironborn kill fellow Ironborn. Or Greyjoys kill Greyjoys. Asher couldn't think of what to say as he finished his cup of wine, and then Asher saw them return from Prince Doran's Solar. I would have loved to have seen the Red Viper and Uncle Aaron debate on the drowned god. As they passed each other, Theon and Uncle Roderick shook hands with Prince Oberyn, whom walked towards his brother's Solar, before they walked to Asher. Both were beaming with delight as they looked at some fancy parchment before they joined Asher. Asher couldn't hear what they were discussing, but from how they looked, she knew that they were in good moods. But the first step, Theon. We've come a long way and we are doing brilliantly, said Uncle Roderick. What's this? Asher asked. A legal document allowing the Iron Islands to build 3 coastal trading posts in Dorne, said Theon. I will have them built and use them as another gateway for us to get trading goods from Essos, said Uncle Roderick. And with these trading posts, what then? Asked Asher. The kingdoms of Westeros will gradually warm to us, and I will negotiate with the Lords Paramount to build trading posts with them, that the Iron Islands might use them for our seafaring captains to sail the seas and make lawful fortunes in trading across the known world, said Uncle Roderick. Who will run these trading posts, Uncle? Asked Theon. I know just the right men, have no worry. Former captains of the Iron Fleet whom have become too old for raiding and reaving and have begun lives as merchants, said Uncle Roderick before he patted Theon's shoulder. Chapter 30, A Chance to Make Amends. Chapter text. Interlude X, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, 2001. Rhaegar Targaryen, Martin Xhokas. Good luck out there, Benjen. I'll be sure to bring back some wild meat, said Benjen with a grin as he and his party rode to the tunnel. Even now, ever since he had first joined the Night's Watch over 10 years ago, Rhaegar still found it surprising that Benjen would consider him a friend after all that happened to Lyanna. Rhaegar had helped Benjen every day of his training throughout his time as a recruit, not merely to make amends for what he had done, but to try and bring him some sense of inner peace with himself. But on the day that Benjen had returned from his first ranging beyond the wall, he had told Rhaegar, I forgive you for everything. Rhaegar wept at hearing the words. As first ranger, Rhaegar had selected Castle Black's best rangers, Benjen, Waymar Royce and Qhorin Halfhand, to scout beyond the wall for the impending march of Mance Rayder, the so-called king beyond the wall, and his entire army. Just gauge at their numbers, do not do anything that may give away that we are planning for their arrival, said Rhaegar. You need not worry, Rhaegar. We know full well what they do to interlopers, said the humorous Halfhand before the three led their party away. Rhaegar decided to walk to Uncle Aemond's Solar. Ever since he arrived at Castle Black over 5 and 10 years ago, he had been a great source of comfort and kindness in a cold, unfamiliar and unforgiving place. He had treated the many injuries and wounds he had received from the fists of Brandon and Eddard Stark and spoke the first kind words to him ever since his imprisonment at Castle Black. Rhaegar entered his Solar, where he saw his steward, Chet, helping him sit down. I hear gentle but heavy footsteps. Is that you, Rhaegar? He asked, his milky eyes turning to him. It is, he said with a smile. Do come and sit down. Chet, bring the letter and my supper, he said. Yes, Maester, he said before walking away. As Roriger sat opposite him, he wondered what letter he was talking about. I'm glad that you came. A letter just arrived, for you. For me? Roriger asked, surprised. No letter had ever come for Roriger ever since Elia had sent the angry letter restricting all the letters which he was trying to send to Egon and Rhaenys, which had all been burnt by Elia. It's from Egon. Egon. My son. My son whom is now my king. When Roriger had heard that Egon was crowned king, he was overjoyed at the news, but wept that he couldn't be there to see his son or his daughter. He had hoped that by now, Elia would have found it in her great and wonderful heart to forgive him. But this never happened. Chet brought Uncle Eamon his supper and passed him a ladle spoon and then passed Roriger an opened letter with a broken seal. Roriger stared at the seal of a three-headed dragon. He gulped when he recognized the sigil of his house and ran a finger over it. He opened the letter and inhaled heavily before he began to read it. To First Ranger Roriger of House Targaryen. Father, it has been a great many years since you last saw me, perhaps on the day before you left to lead the Loyalist armies against Robert Baratheon. I'm afraid I do not know if this is true or not, for Mother does not speak of those days fondly, and I do not wish to upset her. I am sorry to say that I have been putting off writing to you for a long time. For several years, I have hated you for all that happened and all that Mother talked of. But, those whom knew you as a friend and those whom knew you since you were a boy, all speak of a man whom loved his family, but was haunted by the dark presence of your father and sought comfort in books and scrolls. I might never have written to you, had it not been for my betrothed, Lady Sansa of House Stark. She has convinced me that all deserve a second chance, including you. And it was she whom helped me write this to you. I am sorry for not writing sooner to you, but I had no wish to upset Mother by writing to you. I have spent a long time preparing for my time as king, but have spent all of that time without you in my life, helping me for my role as Crown Prince or my current role as king. I would have liked to have visited you in Castle Black before being crowned, but I think Mother would have prevented me from ever doing so. Rhaenys, I am sure, would want the same, however she is too much like Mother to admit otherwise. A great many things are changing across the realm, in my less than a few moons as king, it seems. New houses are being created, in the Stormlands, the Riverlands, the Reach and the North. This is all part of a grand vision Mother, Grandmother, Rhaenys, Aunt Daenerys, Uncle Viserys and I have planned for the future of the realm. Uncle Viserys has been awarded the lordship of Summerhall and creating House Visarion and is soon to wed Melissa Celtigar. Aunt Daenerys is soon to wed Fortis Baratheon and heir to Storm's End. Rhaenys is soon to wed Willas Tyrell, heir to Highgarden. And I am now betrothed to the lovely Sansa Stark. We are to wed 5 moons from now, when she turns 5 and 10. She is such a lovely, kind, sweet and good-humored girl. Throughout the days leading to my coronation, she was the only one of the many noble ladies attempting to woo me, whom was unafraid to be honest with me or make good japes. It was amusing to see the Lannisters and Tyrells angered at hearing me announce my forthcoming marriage to her, rather than choosing either of their daughters. Though I am sad that you couldn't be there for the coronation, I would like to extend a wedding invitation to you for when we wed at the year's end, 4 moons from now, by the time you receive this. I hope that we can continue to write to each other between now and then and to meet properly at my wedding. And perhaps, once we are wed, Sansa and I might visit Winterfell and make a royal visit to Castle Black. Yours sincerely, Egon. Roriger wept as he finished the letter. He wept for 5 whole minutes before he keenly read it all over again and again, stroking each word of the letter, desperate to feel his only connection to his children. He hadn't wept this much ever since he had received the letter from Elia banning him from writing more letters to King's Landing. But now, for the first time, he felt hope. Will you write to him? Aemon asked, his hand on his shoulder. I rebuilt my life from the ashes of the rebellion, uncle. From that day Elia stopped me from writing, I thought I had lost them forever. But now, I can write to him. Perhaps soon to Rhaenys. And then see them. Roriger again descended into a flood of tears as he held the letter close to his chest. Come, Roriger, stand up. Uncle Aemon helped him stand up and sit back down. Roriger wiped the tears on his face with his sleeve before looking down at the letter, holding it gently, treasuring the feeling of it in his hands, for the words it contained from Egon. I will write as many letters as I can to him. And perhaps, he might convince Rhaenys for us to write to each other. And then I can at last meet them properly in King's Landing. God's new and old bless Sansa for convincing him to give me a chance and to write to me. For so many years, I have felt that I don't deserve another chance. But, if they are willing to give me such a chance, then I will not waste it. I swear it. Catelyn v. Catelyn and Bran hosted a small feast in Winterfell to celebrate Sansa's betrothal, Robb and Jaime's wedding, and also to say goodbye to Alaric, Byrne and Rickon now that they were to go to their new homes of Moat Cailin, Wolf's Den and Snow Hilm respectively. In spite not changing in size, the North has grown stronger and more powerful since Bran first inherited Winterfell, Catelyn thought with pride for what she and Bran had accomplished together. The plan was for them to spend 2 weeks every moon at their seats and learn what was expected of them as lords of their own houses and to meet their subjects, before spending of the rest of the moon back in Winterfell, until they were of age at 4 and 10. Catelyn was proud of her younger sons, now that they were all lords of their own houses and that soon, they could plan for wedding their daughters to suitable heirs to northern houses, perhaps even southern houses. It will be very quiet with you all going to your new homes, Bran said to their sons. But we will still come back home, father said Rickon sweetly. I know, my boy. Forgive your foolish old father. I'll just miss my boys all being home, said Bran with a proud smile for their sons. The next day, Catelyn, Bran, Robb, Arya, Lysara and Jane waved goodbye to Alaric, Byrne and Rickon as they all separately left for their new homes. And now that he was old enough and wed, Bran and Catelyn invited both Robb and Jane to their meetings with Maester Luwin in Bran's Solar. 3 more banners answering to Winterfell, father said Robb. Aye. And with this, more people call the North home, said Bran before he gestured to Maester Luwin. My lord, a total of 12 villages have been built in Wolf's Den, at least 40 in Moat Cailin and 8 in Snow Hilm, he said. More soldiers in the North's armies, Jane commented. True, but there is no need to talk of war, said Catelyn. But, father, with all of these villages, can we afford the costs for extra food and supplies needed for building more infrastructure for their lands and peoples? Robb asked. Not quite, Robb. For we are in the process of glass gardens being built in these villages and towns. Thus, making the North self-reliant and not having to spend coin on purchasing food from the Tyrells, said Catelyn. Whilst we are on the subject of other great houses, my lord, a raven has come. From Pike, said Maester Luwin. From the Greyjoys. What do they want? Asked Catelyn. I know not, my lady, replied the good Maester. Read it, Maester Luwin, said Bran. He broke the Kraken seal on the letter and unfurled the letter before he cleared his throat and spoke. To Brandon of House Stark. Lord of Winterfell. Warden of the North. Lord Stark, quite simply, it is no secret to us in the Iron Islands with how the North has built a great many glass gardens in the North to end the reliance on the riverlands and the reach for food. I would ask for help in building glass gardens in the Iron Islands, a price I would pay 50,000 gold dragons for, and to open a trading agreement between our two countries. I eagerly await your reply, Lord Stark. Yours sincerely. Theon of House Greyjoy. Lord Reaper of Pike. Lord of the Iron Islands. Trading with the Greyjoys. Can they be trusted? Jane asked. The king seems to think so. Theon Greyjoy has become famous with his efforts to change the Ironborn raiding way of life into a more peaceful seafaring way of life. Indeed, he has created a trading alliance with the Martells and crushed the pirates of the Stepstones, said Bran. Will we accept, father? Asked Robb. I think we should. Balon Greyjoy certainly was not trustworthy nor eager to adapt with the changing world. But Theon Greyjoy may be beneficial in an alliance that could benefit the North, said Catelyn. I agree. I'll write a reply to the Greyjoy lad and accept and invite him to Winterfell to speak more on the matter, said Bran. Chapter 31, A Dark Stirring. Chapter text. Brandon v. It had been 2 moons since Alaric, Byrne and Rickon had left Winterfell for their new homes, and as lords of their own holdings. Whilst they were glad to return to Winterfell, Brandon could see how happy they were as they told stories of being lords of their own seats and talking of life at Moat Cailin, Wolf's Den and Snow Hilm respectively. Brandon was glad to see them all happy and was proud of all they had done as lords of their own seats and as bannermen of Winterfell. but he still felt nostalgia for the past. It feels like many years ago when all our children were all here at home with Kat and I, he thought as their sons left Winterfell to return to their family seats. Brandon met with Kat, Robb and Jane in his solo whilst Mayor Stillowin was preparing the most recent reports from Moat Cailin, Wolf's Den and Snowhelm. I'm glad that they are happy with their lordships, father, though I still do miss having them here and sparring with them in the yard, said Robb. We all do, Robb my lad. But they at least still visit us and are still learning to be lords of their own houses, Brandon replied. Have any betrothals been made for them? Jane asked. Gods, please don't turn into Cat when you and Robb have children, Brandon inwardly hoped when he looked at his daughter. Eddara Tallheart will wed Alaric, Lyanna Mormont will wed Bern and Rickon will wed Talia Forrester, Brandon replied. It was then that Mayor Stillowin joined them. Mayor